It's Monday, February 7th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 12, in Smiths Falls, minus 7 degrees. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. It's a state of emergency declared in the city as police move to crack down on convoy supplies. Here's City News reporter Chris Curries.
The mayor of Ottawa declared a state of emergency in the face of ongoing protests that have overwhelmed local resources. In making the declaration, Jim Watson says the convoy is dangerous and posing a threat to the safety and security of residents. It's also asking for help from other jurisdictions, including the provincial and federal governments. A special city council meeting will take place at 1 this afternoon. Now, this was shortly before police moved to choke the convoy's supply chain. Last night, armed police started their crackdown on supplies, raiding the baseball parking lot used by organizers as a logistical hub to seize liters of fuel and arrest 2 people for mischief. 5 others were arrested, including 2 downtown, where police also appeared on Sunday night to be taking fuel used to keep cars idling in the bitter cold. Police had earlier in the day threatened arrest for anyone bringing items like gasoline or supplies to protesters and the 500 vehicles downtown. Police also issuing over 100 tickets, many of them for excessive horn honking. Chris Curries, City News.
City News time 9:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
For Ottawa, the Valley, Smiths Falls, any flurries this morning won't last long. Generally mainly cloudy. More flurries return tonight, though. The high today -2, -9 for the low. And tomorrow, chance of flurries once again, the high -1. For today, the high -2.
And right now it's minus 12 in Ottawa, minus 7 in Smiths Falls. An Ontario court is scheduled to hear arguments this afternoon in a proposed multi-million-dollar class action lawsuit by some Ottawa residents who want protesters camped in the downtown to stop honking their horns.
A group of downtown residents is asking for an injunction to prevent truckers parked on city streets from honking their horns repeatedly throughout the day, with their lawyer saying the noise is causing irreparable harm because of how long and prolonged it's been. The hearing comes as Ottawa police get ready to provide more details on a series of arrests and seizures related to what local officials have called an illegal occupation of the capital's core. Officers seized fuel and vehicles, issued more than 100 tickets, and arrested 7 people. Ottawa's mayor has declared a state of emergency, saying there is a serious danger and threat to the safety and security of residents. Laurie Paris, The Canadian Press.
City News time 9:02.
The Beijing 2022 Olympic Games.
There was a medal harvest today for Canada in Beijing, including one only described as a complete shock. Here's City News reporter Jamie Pulfer.
Well, this was totally wild. Team Canada made it to the mixed team ski jumping final and walked away with the bronze medal. This is Canada's first ever ski jumping medal at the Olympics. So a bronze medal for Canada in mixed team ski jumping. More hardware today. Day 3 in Beijing. Kim Buten winning the bronze in women's short track speed skating, the 500-meter event. She also won the bronze in that event 4 years ago in South Korea. And Canada's first gold medal of these games, a first ever in snowboard slope style. 27-year-old Max Perot taking the top of the podium after battling cancer. He went through months of chemotherapy for Hodgkin's lymphoma. All of that happening since the last Olympics in South Korea. Fellow Canadian Mark McMorris also won the bronze in this event. Jamie Pulfer, City News.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Good, bad, or complicated.
There's no news in Ottawa and the Valley he won't talk about.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
And here we all are again, living in a state of emergency. What does that mean? Not that much as far as I can tell. But here we are nonetheless. Day 11, state of emergency, some developments, but fair to say, no end in sight. And good morning, and welcome to the Rob Snow Show. It's going to be another busy day in the news game. We have you covered. And we'll even offer you an opportunity to share your opinion on everything that's been going on in our town. Look, I've covered a lot of breaking news in my career, covered a lot of protests in this city, but I have to say, I've never seen anything like this. everything that's been going on in the capital over the last week and a half, in this city that once made world headlines because it had a wine rack in the Byward Market is now the epicenter of some sort of, global movement. It's making news all over the world. And depending on who you ask, it's either an existential fight for freedom or a nationwide insurrection. It's either peace, love, and harmony, family-friendly, the closest we'll ever get to Winterlude, or it's a haven of hate. Whatever it is, I think a lot of people in the city wish it would all just come to an end. But it's not over yet, and I don't think anyone knows when this ends or how this ends. And all you can do in the news business, at least from where I sit, is kind of watch it all unfold and hope that it ends peacefully. Those most affected want their downtown core back. And there are many so upset with government policies on pandemic restrictions feel they want their voices heard. Maybe then they'll go home. Let's hope nobody gets hurt between now and then. Coming up on the show this morning, Barry McLoughlin from TransformLeaders.ca. He is our resident expert on crisis communications here on the Rob Snow Show. He's with us every Monday. He'll be here a little later this morning, around 11:30. So the you-know-what has hit the fan. What do you say now? That's Barry's job. To give advice to people in leadership positions. What do you tell the public now? What message do you try to get across to the public? And there are a few in high office and in leadership roles who could use some very strategic, poignant advice in this area right now on how to navigate their way through this unholy storm and instill some confidence in the public that they actually have a command of the situation. The mayor going on a radio station and saying, we're outnumbered, we're outgunned, they're calling the shots and have the run of the place, it doesn't instill a lot of confidence in the people who live here. The chief of police saying there might not be a policing solution to this. Saying things like, we may need to get used to this because the democratic fabric of society has changed. Well, that's not the most hopeful message to send to residents who have been wondering up until the events of last night why we have a police force in this city at all. Also coming up, analysis on the events of the last week and a half. From the municipal point of view, there is a special meeting of the City Council this afternoon. Fair to say it's an emergency meeting of the City Council, just hours after the declaration of the state of emergency by Mayor Watson. City Council meetings at 1 o'clock today. As with all City Council meetings, I imagine this one will be broadcast by our good friends at Rogers Television. There's only one item on the agenda, and it reads in all caps, impact of the truck convoy demonstration on the city's residents and businesses. And again, that starts at 1 o'clock, and I suspect, we'll hear from the mayor and the senior leadership team, maybe the chief of police again. Ahead of that, we're going to be joined by a couple of people who are no strangers to issues at City Hall. Walter Robinson was, for a brief time in his career, the chief of staff to an Ottawa mayor, Larry O'Brien. But Walter's also had some big jobs in government relations. He was past federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. He ran for the Conservatives in 2004. He'll join us. Alex Cullen is a former long-serving Ottawa City councillor. He's a former MPP, remains heavily involved in NDP politics, particularly in the West End. His partner, Teresa Kavanagh, is a current city councillor for Bay Ward. And Alex Cullen's also the president of the Federation of Citizens Associations of Ottawa. So Walter is on the right, and he's from Orleans, and Alex is from the left. He's from the West End. So we have the city covered, I think, geographically, ideologically, at 9:30 this morning. I mean, the crazy thing is we are so governed here in Ottawa. We have so many layers of government in Ottawa because we're the capital city. We're like the most governed city in the country, and yet government, through all of this, has come across, over the duration of this protest, government, it appears to be futile, really. The construction of the trucker shack on NCC land was kind of the coup de grace for government's handling of this whole affair, since it's It's not that far from where the NCC decided it just had to bust up a little girl's lemonade stand some years ago. And I mean, there's politics at every turn. This is happening in a big election year. We have the provincial election in just a few months, in early June. And believe you me, there are quite a few Progressive Conservative Party seats here in Ottawa that the Ford government, is desperate to hold on to in ridings like Nepean and Ottawa, West Nepean and Canada Carleton. I don't know if the events of the last week and a half could have an impact locally here on the provincial election. We'll ask Walter and Alex about that. And then you have the municipal election this fall. Now, Mayor Watson has already announced he's not going to run for re-election. I don't think this is what he had in mind for his swan song. First of all, public inquiry into light rail, and now a massive protest by truckers taking over a part of the downtown core. And 10 days into it, having to declare a state of emergency. Meantime, you have Catherine McKenney, the downtown councillor for Somerset Ward, very much of the progressive persuasion, running for mayor all over the news media in the last week or so. Standing up for the downtown residents. Bob Shirelli, running for mayor. He was on my show last week. Called upon the city lawyers to go to court and seek an injunction, something the city has yet to do. And you have Diane Deans running for mayor. And she is in the middle of it all because she's the chair of the Ottawa Police Services Board. So, I mean, there's just politics wrapped up in this all over the place. You have conservative leadership politics. The conservative leadership race is on. That's another angle here. So many layers to the story. We'll try to unpeel a lot of them. You've heard about the class action lawsuit. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes from now. We have one of the lawyers involved with that on our show, Emilie Taman. She's run for office in the city before. Well-known local lawyer with Champ and Associates. I've interviewed her many times over the years. Class action lawsuit, seeking $9.8 million in damages, $4.8 million for the nuisance of it all, and then another $5 million in punitive damages. So she'll explain how all of that works and what they hope will come of it. And we'll do the talkback hour. We do that every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock, and it is always an adventure when you invite people to call in and comment on the news of the day. But we're going to give it our best shot again today. I mean, there's no bigger story than this, is there? And barring something unforeseen, I don't see it changing anytime soon. This is the top story. And will be until it all comes to a conclusion one way or another. I guess a question that I would have for you to kind of get the conversation going this morning after the 10 o'clock news at 750-1310 would be, why are we in this mess in Ottawa? We have seen protests in solidarity with this convoy in other cities. Lily in the newspaper today says it's all Watson and Scully's fault. It's the fault of the chief of police and Mayor Watson that we are in the mess we are in here in this city. Poor decision-making, poor pre-protest planning, if you will. In Toronto, it looks like the convoy protest was a one-day wonder. And all the streets that were closed in Toronto are open again today. Pretty much the same thing in Quebec City. They say they're going to come back in a couple of weeks to Quebec City, but largely a non-event today. Here in the capital city, we're into the 11th day. The 11th day. 11 days and counting. Some developments, but nobody is ready to roll the credits on this thing just yet. So why are we in this mess? 750-1310 after the 10 o'clock news as we roll on on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310
Our
AM.
ongoing coverage of the protests continues here on City News. And one of the developments, of course, is this class action lawsuit. $9.8 million class action lawsuit over the continuous vehicle horn noises, and it's been filed on behalf of residents in the city's downtown core by Champ and Associates, and a lawyer with Champ and Associates is Emilie. Taman joins me this morning on City News. Good morning.
Good morning.
Very nice to hear from you. So tell me a little bit more about this lawsuit. What's behind this lawsuit?
So this lawsuit is being brought on behalf of residents of downtown Ottawa. So at the moment, we have a single representative plaintiff, and if the matter is certified as a class action, it would be brought on behalf of all residents who live within a 6-block radius of Parliament Hill to compensate them for the extreme mental and physical suffering they've been enduring over the past 11 days now, specifically as it relates to the persistent honking of incredibly loud horns. We're talking about transport truck air horns, and in some cases vehicles equipped with train horns that are being deployed, for really long periods on an intermittent basis.
Okay, so who is being sued?
So So the lawsuit presently names 5 defendants, as well as an additional 60 individuals who are identified as John Does. So we've been able to identify 5 people who self-identify really as organizers of the trucker convoy, who we have seen, all kinds of communication online that would support the idea that they're organizing. But then we've also named the truckers themselves. You can think of it as being almost akin to a conspiracy. So we're saying there are a number of parties who have worked in concert together to cause harm to the residents of Ottawa through this process. And we know that the honking of horns has been a flagship technique that this group has been using. So, while there's been a lot of talk about, this happened, but maybe it was someone rogue and like this other thing over here, but the honking of the horns, we feel that we'll be able to show has been a very organized, concerted effort to cause as much disruption as possible to the residents of Ottawa.
Okay. This figure, $9.8 million, how do you arrive at that?
So we looked at other similar cases. The lawsuit is framed in terms of the tort of private nuisance. And so we looked at other cases where courts have found individuals or organizations liable for private nuisance. And it's really difficult to put a number on it, but we estimated, based on court precedents, that each individual plaintiff could be eligible to receive damages in the range of $100 to $200 per day per person. And so based on that figure, at least up until the point the lawsuit was filed, but of course those numbers will continue to escalate as the thing continues, if it does. So that came out to about $4.8 million, and then we're seeking a further $5 million in punitive damages, and that's one way that the court can really denounce this type of really intentional, harmful conduct on the part of the defendant.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because it's so remarkably close to the $10 million figure for the GoFundMe, whether it had anything to do with that number at all.
Well, we were certainly...
It's not just a coincidence.
I think in some ways it's a coincidence in the sense that in particular, the individual damage, the daily damages is based on judicial precedent. But of course, we'll be exploring all avenues for recovering those damages in the event that the lawsuit is successful.
Okay. So in addition to that, you've been seeking an injunction on the noise, right? And you're
That's
expecting
right, yes.
You're expecting some news on that today, I guess, a ruling on that today. Is that right?
We have a hearing this afternoon at 1:00, and that will be, the opportunity for the parties to make their case as to why an injunction should or shouldn't be granted. All that we're asking, just to be clear, as far as the injunction is concerned, is for a court order that the honking of horns stop immediately. So we're not seeking an injunction that would disband the protest completely, but we're trying to get at one of the things that's been causing the most direct harm to residents that are living right at the core of where this is all happening.
Okay. We're in the south end. You're right downtown. I heard it was better this morning. It wasn't as noisy this morning. Is that true?
I can't really speak to that from where I'm at. I'm not in the core of it myself, but I can tell you that I was down there yesterday at 1:00. And it was unlike anything I've ever heard. I really don't think people are fully appreciating what it's like to have a train horn blowing on an almost continuous basis right outside your bedroom window. It is the most oppressive thing I've ever heard. I think you really have to hear it to believe it.
Okay.
This is a level of harm that I think a lot of people are underestimating.
Okay. You're pretty in tune with the local municipal political scene. So I have to ask you, what do you think about the declaration of the state of emergency by the mayor yesterday?
Yeah, I'm still sort of trying to wrap my head around that. It's certainly a positive sign to see something happening. Whether and to what extent this particular mechanism is going to bring the change that people are looking for, I can't really say. The way David White, the city's lawyer, has talked about it, it seems to be more about a vehicle for quicker procurement, for the city to get resources. he has explained, and it's my understanding as well, that it doesn't necessarily give police any additional power or the city any additional power. But I mean, they don't really need additional power. They have the power they need. It's just a question of, how and when and to what extent they decide to.
Are you encouraged though to see them going into, for example, the compound at the baseball stadium and taking fuel, and then saying if you're supplying fuel to the protesters, you could be held to account for that criminally? What do you think about that?
I mean, I think, every step towards bringing an end to this is a step that I would consider to be encouraging. So to that extent, yes. Having said that, just taking the fuel is a pretty timid first step. Again, I don't have any insight into what their broader operational plan is. Right. And from the perspective of our client and our prospective clients, taking away the fuel doesn't necessarily put an end to what's been tormenting them over these past 10 days, specifically.
So just a couple of more things on the lawsuit. I know one can sign a waiver, right? So you don't come after them. Explain how that works.
Yeah, so the way the lawsuit is framed, all of the defendants could be found to be jointly liable for the $10 million in damages. And so our client instructed us to make a settlement offer to the individual truckers, and many of whom I don't think fully realize the extent of their risk in being caught up in a lawsuit like this. And the offer that was made was, if you leave Ottawa by Monday at 10 a.m., we'll take steps to release you from the lawsuit. So any release has to be approved by a court. But that in principle, if you share your name and your license plate number and you leave town, like we don't see any evidence of your vehicle in the city after Monday, then you have an opportunity to be released from the lawsuit.
Have you had some uptake on that?
I haven't checked the email this morning. We had a team out yesterday leafleting, so actually distributing the releases in the core of the protest. And certainly what I heard back from those folks was that, like I said, a lot of the truckers didn't really realize that they could potentially be on the hook personally. And so, I would expect that they will have been reflecting on that overnight, and hopefully they'll be taking us up on our offer. Okay.
And if someone is in the immediate area, the affected area, as identified by your client, are they automatically a member of the class, or they have to apply to be a member of the class, or how does that work?
So one of the initial steps of an action like this is seeking certification of the class. So a court has to look at it, listen to why we say these people all have a common interest, and assuming that the class is certified by a court, then you're right. There's no additional steps that people have to make to become part of the lawsuit. And I can tell you, over the weekend, we received hundreds, if not thousands, of emails from people who want to take part in this, which I think really does speak to the extent to which people have been suffering over the past several days. So, but we've been assuring people that for now, it's just a question of sitting tight. And that when the time comes, there will be a process for notifying people of their right to come and seek their share of the damages.
Okay. Thank you so much. Very informative this morning. Nice to hear from you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, February 7th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 11 degrees. It's minus 7 in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news this hour. Ottawa City Councillors will have one task today: brainstorm at a special City Council meeting on ways to end the convoy protest in our downtown. Police have started a crackdown with reinforcements from both OPP and RCMP, but some feel other measures should be taken, while Premier Doug Ford says he has granted everything asked of the province by the city. Some feel more could have been done at the provincial level. For example, the Liberal leader says the Premier should take 2 direct actions to end this convoy protest. Stephen Del Duca says the province should declare a state of emergency, as Ottawa City has done, and also seize assets of protesters like their trucks. Del Duca says the Provincial Attorney General does have the power to take that step. While the City Council meeting starts at 1 o'clock, that is also the deadline for lawyers in a potential class action lawsuit against the truckers' loud protest. The judge told lawyers to have all their paperwork in by 1 this afternoon for him to consider that application. City News Time, 9:31. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So let's all spend some time now studying the various angles of this news story that has consumed Ottawa for the better part of the last 2 weeks. It's a great time to welcome back to our show Walter Robinson, who I mentioned was for a very brief time the Chief of Staff to Ottawa Mayor Larry O'Brien. Walter's also had big jobs in government relations, past federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, former Conservative candidate way back when. Morning, Walter.
Good morning, Rob.
Yep, Alex Cullen, former long-serving Ottawa City Councillor, former MPP, and as well, he is president of the Federation of Citizens Associations of Ottawa. Good morning, Alex Cullen.
Good morning, Rob.
Alex, let's start with you, and Walter is limiting the Cullen rule to about 1 minute and 20 seconds this morning, so...
Carry on.
Nevertheless, the mayor has declared a state of emergency for Ottawa. What is your reaction to that, Alex Cullen?
About time. I think everyone greeted that declaration with relief. Now we want to see some action resulting from it. It's one thing to declare a state. What happens next? And it's good to see that the police are finally cracking down on the illegal blocking of our city streets, on the incessant noise, on the harassment of Ottawa citizens going about their business. So finally we're seeing some action.
Okay, but what does it do, though, Alex? What does it do? What's different today than yesterday?
It does provide the city access to more resources. So it gives city staff some powers. It gives the police some powers. Nothing extraordinary, but it's there. It's a bridge you cross. For example, a state of emergency was declared in 2019 during the flood, which enabled the city to get resources to deal with that threat to public safety. So it's a step in the right direction. It opens some doors. Will it do the job? Well, we'll wait and see.
Okay. Walter Robinson, what's your reaction to the declaration of the state of emergency by Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson?
Well, I think Alex is being charitable. I would say it's about freaking time and probably about 5 to 7 days too late in the context of a political signal of intent in terms of the seriousness with which city administration takes the issue of protest. I don't want to derail the conversation, but I think there's a failure here of all 3 orders of government and law enforcement, 5 law enforcement agencies. And I was remarking about this yesterday. I don't think there's a G7 capital or a G20 capital on the face of the planet where open flames and vehicles that could be used as weapons would be tolerated within 100 meters of the seat of government, the seat of the head of government, finance, Treasury Board, 400 meters away from DND, a good 5 to 10 minute 2,000 person march down onto Storm City Hall. This is a national security issue, And we don't look good in the eyes of the world. And you can rest assured that there are people in other national capitals taking a look. And this is not very positive for any order of government. And I'd like to know, and maybe there is one, what is the command table doing? And I bring the experience of each year at Canada Day, the city convenes a table of about 25 different agencies, 5 police forces, transit agencies on both sides of the city, municipal works, public security experts, anti-terrorism experts. We remove newspaper boxes, we remove garbage bins. We do a lot of things to make our downtown core safe, preparing for a week of 100,000 people in our core. I'm not sure if that has happened in this space. And I would like to say one other thing. This is not the first time Ottawa has experienced this. We had a week-long truckers' protest on Wellington Street in 1991, in May of 1991. We have not learned our lessons, and I'd like to ask the question, did anybody go back and talk to police officers and other people who were involved at that time? What lessons did we learn? Because they had 1,200 people, truckers, tie up the 401 in May of 1991, and within about 24 to 36 hours, tickets, fines, a bunch of things were issued, and they moved people along. There's a lot of questions to be asked here. I appreciate that people are frustrated, and I'm not a frontline officer, and we don't know all the details and intelligence behind the scenes. There are many, many questions to be asked. This is a national security failure. This is not only an Ottawa issue.
Okay, so a failure to plan appropriately then, Walter.
A failure to plan, most intelligence failures are failures of imagination, failures to research, to get insight from past experience, what has happened in other places around the world. It's called Google. You can go look at it. And secondly, just a scenario plan. What if this? What if that?
Right.
What if this? Did anybody ask, what if they start taking the wheels off trucks and chain them and then build up a fortified snow barrier? Like, again, what if they bring in a bouncy castle? And just as an irony, the bouncy castle outside the opposition leader's office, it's irony beyond the extreme.
Okay. Well, I mean, it was no secret that it was coming to the capital, Alex. I mean, we were watching it roll through city after city after city. I mean, one of the stories was all the people who came out in support of it, lining overpasses, lining the highway. All of it was, there was no shock when it arrived here. So did the city prepare appropriately for it?
It was clearly a failure of the current police structure to respond adequately to this very recognizable oncoming threat. I mean, they said they were coming to plug up our streets until they got what they wanted. So it was pretty obvious, pretty clear, and quite frankly, I think the police thought, okay, we'll give them the weekend, 8,000 people on the Hill, then Monday they'll all disappear. But they didn't disappear. They did what they said they were going to do. They dug in. And that's when the police should have start responding, by going around telling people, okay, you're here now. You've got to be gone by tomorrow morning, or else you're going to be facing tickets and tow trucks. But they didn't do that. And that's where we dropped the ball. So I'm sure there's going to be a postmortem afterwards, but we don't want to see this repeated again.
Okay. So there's a city council meeting today. Emergency city council meeting, I'm calling it, at 1 o'clock. What do you expect to come out of that, Alex?
Well, not a heck of a lot. I mean,
not a heck of a lot. Okay.
No,
Right.
in one sense, council has to seem to be doing something, and certainly the councillors are hearing from their residents that something has to be done. There's going to be an opportunity for the police to talk about what they did do. That finally Saturday they did 450 tickets. Why didn't they do that earlier? Well, it doesn't matter. At least they're doing something, and the War Memorial is being fenced off. Federation Park is fenced off. So some things are happening. So there'll be a show and tell about that. And people want to know, so what are the next steps? And we know that the GoFundMe funding for this has been stopped. We know that there's a class action suit. So there seems to be movement, but people want to know, okay, what's the end state here? When do we know that this thing is turning around? And it will take putting pressure on the truckers. They're going to be facing fines. They're going to be ultimately facing tow trucks if we can get them. And that's another challenge there. So, but quite frankly, there are...
I mean, do you expect it to be more or less a briefing from the senior leadership team and maybe a round of questions from councillors?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So
More for show, then, I guess.
Yes, I hate to say it, but it's a necessary thing that to do. I think more people are interested in the results. Does this lead to something that will resolve this situation? And the notion that the mayor is throwing out, well, maybe a mediator will do something, I think is bizarre because the city is in no position to deliver on any demands that the truckers have. And quite frankly, if we're going to have, evidence-based government in this country, we're not going to be abiding by mob rule.
Walter, what are you expecting out of this 1 o'clock council meeting today?
I'd like to keep my answer short to what Alex said. I'll say ditto. And I apologize for the bad sound quality there a moment ago. I would add, Rob, that people are looking for action. And I hope some people ask some questions of Chief Slowly. He mentioned last week, and I saw the quote, that ticketing and towing was not an elegant solution. I don't, and that language comes from interest-based bargaining in the context of interest-based, like when we're negotiating a union contract. We look for a positive negotiation zone. You want that, I want that. Okay, let's draw concentric circles around that. There's a place we can agree. Law enforcement is not about elegance. Enforcing the rule of law is, yes, I appreciate you want to de-escalate and do a bunch of things, but at a certain point in time, you need to enforce the law. And it's a function, I don't care what your protest is. Did you have a demonstration permit? Did you provide for adequate public services for your protesters? Those sorts of things. And I think as well, to Alex's point, people want to see action. And today will be a lot of speechifying. I'm going to be recording it because I want to see this language play out. And I think this memory of this protest, because this is another week before we clear the downtown core at a minimum, that this is going to reverberate into next October, this coming October's elections.
We'll get into that. I want to get into the politics of it a little later. But Mayor Watson also told the media this morning he wants the federal government to appoint a mediator.
Why? My point is why? To mediate what? There is a point. There is a point there.
Okay.
Mediate. When people leave, I can see that. I can see saying, because there's not common ground to satisfy people. But if folks know there are consequences, and let's talk about when you leave, how you leave. I mean, that's negotiable. If they want to leave on Wednesday and they want to leave under these circumstances, as long as they leave, you can talk about that. But that's it. I mean, the city cannot negotiate vaccine mandates. The city cannot negotiate change of government. So there's some things that a mediator cannot do, but mediating how to leave this situation, that's doable.
Walter?
I think the mediation is the context of we're already seeing in terms of if the reports are to be believed, the jubilant mood around downtown for the last week this morning is one of uncertainty for the people who are there. That's a positive thing for everyone. And I think the mediation can be done very simply in the context of here it is, and this message can be delivered to the protesters and the organizers quietly, but it should also be delivered publicly in the context of who is in control. The state must be in control at the end of the day of the rule of law. None of us are above that to say, here's the time. It's Wednesday at 4, and you'll be allowed to have diesel. You need diesel to have these trucks run, those sorts of things. That will be brought in, and here's the orderly progression of how you're going to get out of the city. Whether it's Thursday, Friday, I think it's probably Thursday or Friday. That's about it.
In some ways, we're up against very powerful forces. I mean, if you're the city, just talking about the city, you have the chief of police and the mayor. Meantime, there's a promo for Fox News, Sean Hannity's show on Fox News. Millions of viewers every night, like tens of millions of viewers every night. It's going to be all about this story here in Ottawa. Tucker Carlson, same with Fox News, been all over this story. Elon Musk is the wealthiest person in the world. He's, been singing the praises of the truckers. Donald Trump, Trudeau's an idiot, far left idiot, all of this stuff. Gosh, it's almost when you think about it, it's almost not like it's not a fair fight, Walter. I mean, you're up against some pretty powerful voices there, right?
There's moral suasion with those voices. Not sure I'd want Donald Trump supporting anything that I supported. But at the end of the day, they're not sending money. They're not sending reinforcements. And the bigger issue for us as a country, to my first point, is
right.
Do we have the rule of law, and can we secure our national capital? Yes or no? Right now, the answer is no. And that is more troubling to me than our protests.
So let's put this in context, because this protest here is not affecting the function of the federal government. It's not impacting on Parliament. What it is an inconvenience to the citizens of Ottawa jamming up the street. I mean, the symbolism, Walter's got it right, the symbolism in a G20 country, it looks terrible that we can't control our environment and protect our institutions and enforce the rule of law. That looks terrible. But the actual inconvenience is that some streets downtown are blocked. There's a lot of noise. It's intolerable. It should be resolved, and the city should be taking steps. Finally, is taking steps, but it's not affecting the party to whom it was supposed to impact. These truckers came here to change government, to change vaccine mandates. And they're not in front of those people. It's not impacting those people. It's impacting the citizens of Ottawa, and we can't take it anymore, and we expect the rule of law to be enforced. But so this is the huge gap in terms of expectations and reality and impact of these tactics. So certainly, as a media circus, certainly we're going to see this stuff, popular on TV. It looks great TV.
Oh, it's great TV. Yeah.
But, Canadians aren't buying it. Canadians aren't saying, oh, yeah, these guys, they're doing the right thing. I mean, there's a small minority who feel disenfranchised, but generally speaking, Canadians have been following the recommendations of public health officials and will continue to do so until this COVID pandemic is over.
Okay, let's stop here. We'll come back. I want to get into the politics of it all. I mean, we have a federal Conservative leadership race. A lot of people asking, and the longer he's out of public view, the more relevant I think the question becomes, where's the Prime Minister in all of this? There's a provincial election in June, and as Walter mentioned, there's a municipal election in the fall. So there's a lot of political layers to this story. When we come back, this is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
We just took over this business about a few weeks prior to the pandemic, but we've been loving the community, the people, very friendly, but it's been very difficult starting up a new business, just the time that we did, but I'm sure it's the same everywhere. We did take a broken business, which doesn't help us, but we thought we believe in what we do. We're very passionate about food, and we just really wanted to share the Iraqi culture through our food. All our recipes are homemade, so this is very unique. Usually you hear restaurants, shops, it's all frozen food or prepared food, so nothing here is prepared, everything is homemade. We get our meat and produce from a local farm, so supporting local is the way to go. We are supporting all the way. And our meat are actually marinated the day of, so it's as fresh as can be. Quality ingredients, and everything is made from scratch. I get a lot of people when they come in, they say it tastes like Middle Eastern, like back home. So for you to have been to Iraq and have the food there, you can really compare and see the similarity. We do like to focus on healthy. So our recipes, not only the homemade, again, everything is from scratch, but we have from combos and to small sandwiches. One of our favorites and very popular is the chicken salad and the beef salad. So now you're getting all the protein and all these amazing ingredients that we all need. During this time, I find a lot of people are sitting at home and not enough movement. So to come here and get something healthy other than go elsewhere and just put, what's not so good for our bodies, makes a huge difference. So we have shawarma sandwiches, combos. I mean, if you're looking for a meal to feed your family, I would highly recommend the family platter. It comes literally with everything, with potatoes, with rice, with chicken, with beef, and we don't charge extra for mix. I know a lot of places do. Here we just add everything to your platter. And lots of healthy choices for sure. We're very passionate about food, and for our small family business, it's been good. Like I said, it's a little struggle, but we are not a chained restaurant.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
We're talking about the Ottawa impact of Freedom Convoy with Alex Cullen and Walter Robinson. You know what timed tweets are, right? Alex and Walter, you know what timed tweets are. You know, you can schedule tweets, right? Yep. One of them, Robert Hiltz pointed this out, local journalist. The city of Ottawa issued a timed tweet that said, "What do you think Ottawa City needs to do to become a more vibrant nightlife destination? Please let us know." I don't think this was what they had in mind, but nevertheless. And I don't know if vibrant would be used to describe this protest, but nevertheless, let's get into, I want your honest assessment here, Walter Robinson. What do you think of the way the police chief has handled this so far?
I'm not a policing expert.
Right.
I think his language has been the worst, and I saw it on Saturday. I talked earlier about not an elegant solution, and then on Saturday he's quoted as saying the city is under siege, and something to the effect of there is an insurrection of madness across the country. I do not know what that means at all in the context of Toronto, Quebec, and Vancouver cleared their truckers' protests in 24 hours. So I think the language has been, you want a police chief to communicate clearly, concisely, and I think the fewer words, the better. And I contrast that to, I think the deputy chief, and I forget her name, she was talking about during the first weekend, please follow our Twitter feed, please follow all the City of Ottawa for latest updates on road and truck. Very calming, very reassuring, a sense of control in what we are trying to do to help citizens. I compare and contrast those two. So I have not been impressed, and I respect him and everybody who puts on that uniform, but I have not been impressed as somebody who knows a bit about civic government.
All right. Alex?
I think he dropped the ball. I think if you ask him today, would he do the same thing he did initially? I think you get a different message. But we'll deal with that in the postmortem. But I have to say, particularly for the community associations that I represent and the Federation of Citizens Associations, tremendous disappointment in how this has evolved, how the police allowed these folks to dig in, and that buck stops with the chief.
Okay, let's turn our attention to the politics of it all. There's a municipal election this fall. Walter, you've already hinted that you wanted to comment on this. How do you see this affecting the municipal elections in the fall?
Well, I think, the first job of every municipal the mayor is to keep your city safe and keep it functioning. It is functioning for the most part outside of the downtown core. For 25 to 50,000 people in the downtown core, it is not functioning. And when one part of our city hurts, the entire part of our city hurts. So I'm watching very closely as to what some suburban and rural councils are talking about. We've heard Catherine McKenney. We've heard Matt Fleury. We've heard Sean Menard, because their communities are directly impacted. I think what people look at, and when you run, and I think when people vote this fall, they're going to be looking for people who are city councillors, who have that balance between a ward and city perspective. And then the echoes of this occupation will reverberate into the mayoral campaign. And what will you do next time? What steps are you taking? And the postmortem that must occur. I think the impact of this is yet to be played out, but it will impact the mayoral election and local councillor elections.
And probably the next police budget debate as well, Walter, right?
Absolutely.
Because certainly we had a fierce one. just a few months ago. So, Alex, go ahead, Alex. So.
Yeah, it really does depend how this finishes. I mean, will this become a memory, or will this leave scars? Certainly will leave scars on the Police Services Board, and we'll see what happens with the postmortem, but there are other things at play as well. Don't forget, by the time the municipal election rolls around, the LRT inquiry will have produced a report. So there's going to be other things in the mix. But this issue and how to avoid this happening again, because the mob can come down on any pretext and do the same thing. So that will be a discussion. No one wants to live in a city filled with barriers. However, we can't allow these kind of things to happen again, and that's a fair question to ask in the municipal election.
Okay, we're just a few months from the provincial election. Could it impact some of the local races here?
Well, it can.
Yeah?
Don't forget there are other issues at play there. The whole COVID, how the Ford government handled COVID, how they handle long-term care. But this is another issue, and it depends how it ends. If it ends quietly this week, I think the provincial government...
Well, I mean, you have the Liberal leader out there today, Del Duca, saying we have to declare a state of emergency for the entire province and move in and seize trucks from people.
Well, it seems that he didn't need it in Toronto, but we'll see. It really does depend how this plays out.
Okay.
If it remains an open sore, then it is going to spill over to June. You can't avoid it.
Okay.
But if it closes down quietly this week, okay, it's a different story.
Walter?
Yeah, I think I would agree with Alex that how it ends is important. And I think the bigger issues in the provincial context are businesses. I think COVID is more of the referendum on COVID and where we go from here, because we are still going to be in this pandemic. We'll probably have a 6th or 7th wave. Hopefully they are less virulent, less deadly, but we'll have a few more mutations. And every pandemic, if you look at 1918, it's 1,000 days. We're just at about 800 right now. We've got a little ways to go, unfortunately, so I think that'll be the greater focus for the provincial campaign.
Okay, Walter, you're very in tune with Conservative politics. What have you thought of the way Poilievre has handled this?
Well, I think the video was in the making long before last Wednesday, that's for sure.
Right, okay.
Never before has a Canadian politician received 3.3 million views on a video in French and English. I think that's astounding in terms of Pierre's reach. Yeah. I think there will be other very notable candidates, and as I've been speaking with for a long time, I come from the progressive conservative side of the family, but I was a neoconservative at the Taxpayers Federation. I think I understand both sides of this party and its machinations. I've volunteered for it for 40 years. I'm a conservative without a home right now. The road to power for Pierre and for all the other leaders is through the suburbs of this country. You need to fish where the votes are. The base is not enough to form a government. And to be fair to Aaron O'Toole and Andrew Scheer, being the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, on PC Party before, is probably the most thankless and most fractious job in Canadian politics. It's not easy.
Okay. Quick comment on Pierre Poilievre's handling of the situation here, Alex.
Well, he plays well to his base, absolutely, but unfortunately, his support of the convoy coming to Ottawa, I don't think it's going to win on the suburbs of the city of Ottawa, even though he represents one. He has to reach out to the middle. That's where the bulk of the votes are. I think Walter's correct. Can't just play to his base. And I don't know if he can change his spots. I really don't. So we'll wait and see.
Great to talk to both of you. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
See what happens with it.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Walter Robinson and Alex Cullen. I'm Rob Snow. This is City News.
City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smith Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, February 7th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 11 degrees. It's minus 6 in Smith Falls. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Police in the city carried out a series of raids on a site used as a base camp for anti-vaccine mandate protesters. They seized fuel and vehicles and issued more than 100 tickets and arrested 7. This as the mayor has declared a state of emergency in the capital. We get more from City News reporter Chris Curries.
The protesters dug in for over a week dealt a major blow by Ottawa police, who stepped up enforcement this weekend, culminating with a series of raids late last night, focusing on the baseball parking lot, where a convoy command center had been set up. Police removing access to all fuel and supply routes. Police also clearing Confederation Park, which included the temporary wooden structure that was delivering food to supporters. Throughout the day, police arresting 7, 6 of which were for mischief, laid more than 100 tickets, mostly for things like excessive noise, driving the wrong way, and not having a seatbelt, and say more updates are set to come today. Also, the mayor has declared a state of emergency in the capital. In a statement, Jim Watson says it's due to the serious danger of the convoy and the threat it poses to the safety and security of residents. A state of emergency allows the city a bit more flexibility to secure supplies and manage businesses, and was last in effect during the pandemic and the floods of 2019. A special meeting of City Council will be taking place at 1 this afternoon, where officials will discuss the ongoing occupation. Chris Curries, City News.
Now, while the Premier says he has done all Ottawa City has asked him to do, provincial Liberal leader says the Premier can do more. Stephen Del Duca says there should be 2 direct actions taken by the province. It should declare a state of emergency, as Ottawa's done, and also seize the assets of protesters like their trucks. Del Duca says the provincial attorney general has the power to take that step. He says the people of Ottawa are the victims of a dangerous anti-vax mob holding the city hostage. He adds it has gone far beyond a protest. It is an occupation which has to be dealt with strongly. City News Time 10:03, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
For Ottawa, the Valley, Smith Falls, any flurries this morning won't last long. Generally mainly cloudy. More flurries return tonight, though. The high today -2, -9 for the low. And tomorrow, chance of flurries once again. The high -1. For today, the high -2.
And right now, it's minus 11 degrees in Ottawa. It's -6 in Smith Falls. City News Time 10:03.
The Beijing 2022 Olympic Games.
More hardware for Team Canada. It's been an exciting day 3, and Jamie Pulfer has the update.
It's proof anything can happen at the Olympics. Canada wowing the world, winning its first ever Olympic medal in ski jumping, taking the bronze in the new mixed team event. It's the first time since the first Winter Olympics almost a century ago that a North American country has won a ski jumping medal. More Olympic bling for Canada on day 3 in Beijing, with Quebec's Kim Boutin winning the bronze in the women's short track speed skating 500-meter event. She had the same finish in South Korea 4 years ago. And Canada's first gold medal of the Games, a first ever in snowboard slopestyle. Cancer survivor Max Perot taking the top of the podium. The 27-year-old from Quebec went through months of chemotherapy for Hodgkin's lymphoma, all since the last Olympics. Fellow Canadian Mark McMorris also won the bronze, the 3rd consecutive Olympic bronze he's won in this event. Canada has 6 medals so far in Beijing, a gold, silver, 4 bronze. Jamie Pulfer, City News.
And I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Let's see how it goes. 750-1310. Why are we in this mess here in the city of Ottawa? Why are we in this mess? Toronto's not in this mess. Quebec City's not in this mess. Protesters came, voiced their opposition to vaccine mandates and whatever else they were opposed to, and that's it. It was over. Here we are. We're 11 days into this. So how does it come to pass that this protest is now a week and a half old. There's finally been some movement by law enforcement, but, the fact remains the end of this protest is, really nowhere in sight. And, I would hate to think that things are just as likely to get worse before they get better. So why are we in this mess? So 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. I've been away for a few days, but it's good to be back. Or at least I say that now. Joanne in Orleans, good morning.
Well, that's good. Good morning. I think that we are in this mess because we are the nation's capital. I think that we have the parliamentary precinct represents various jurisdictions of government, and unfortunately, geographically, it's smack in the city. For a long time, there have been discussions about how there should be a district like Washington, D.C., and so you'd have Ottawa district.
Yeah.
And maybe this will fuel more discussion so that we have one level of government and one police force who can behave in such a way that this becomes an isolated area. However, probably the reason that that's not happened yet is because we don't really have a lawn like the White House does. We don't have that expansive space to accommodate these kinds of protests. We have a fairly big lawn, but it's not a whole...
Well, it's a construction zone now. And let's face it, Joanne, for the better part of the last decade, the whole precinct has been a construction zone.
Agreed.
Right. Yeah.
But I would like to speak directly to Chief Sali, his handling of it. Mm-hmm. I am 100% appalled, dismayed, outraged even, that there's pressure on the mayor, pressure on Ford, pressure on the police chief, and that no legacy media outlet has held the Prime Minister to account. That all these, it's like water. Water finds a way where there's a crack. Someone is applying pressure, and the water is going everywhere, except where it should be, which is directly on the shoulders of the Prime Minister. And if he really is sick, but I consider him a liar and a hypocrite, if he is sick, do we not have a deputy Prime Minister? Do we have not a second person in charge, a Minister of Transportation, someone who can get
a Minister of Public Safety, a Minister of Transportation, a deputy Prime Minister, right? I mean, if it's not Trudeau, it's Chrystia Freeland, right? Is the number two,
when it's good
right?
times.
I guess so.
I look at Police Chief Sali, and I don't blame him at all for not being aggressive. Toronto and Quebec City don't compare to the capital, the nation's capital. These people came, they hunkered down, they did it because they knew they were up against an immovable force, and they want to be an immovable force as well. Now, I have a daughter who lives down there. I know how absolutely dreadful the honking has been. Other characterizations or exaggerations or outright lies. I happen to have a 20-year-old who went down twice, both Saturdays, to show his support, to see for himself if the mischaracterizations in the media were true, and they were not. We're talking about people, regular folks like us. So would the police chief come in with the riot gear and armed to the teeth and everything else? Of course not. Does no one remember Oka? Does no one remember Ipperwash and other places where police, the G7, how many times have they come in and asserted their force?
Okay, so you think he has shown the... I'm sorry, Joy.
Been left high and dry by the politicians.
Right. So you think he has showed the appropriate level of restraint to this point? Is that what you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Given who his opponents are, right? They're not masked. They're not brandishing guns. They're not brandishing crossbows. There's no threats of violence from the official organizers. And as far as my son goes, when he was there, it was a party. Canada Day atmosphere.
Okay. The chief keeps calling it a volatile situation, a very volatile situation. Right? So.
Because from his point of view, he doesn't know what it's going to be like now if he pushes back with certain force. I don't think regular, ordinary Canadians respond in violence.
Okay.
I don't. But the look, the optics, and why would he be concerned with that?
Joanne,
because every other time, politicians have left their police forces to carry the burden high and dry.
All right,
this
all right,
is at the feet of the Prime Minister.
Go. At the feet of the Prime Minister. Well, he has made himself scarce. That's for darn sure when it comes to Prime Minister Trudeau. But gosh, it seems like everyone in authority is just paralyzed. I mean, like analysis paralysis up until, the clearing out of the fuel last night near the baseball stadium. And I just think it's because they don't know what they're facing, that it's so novel, unprecedented. I think it's befuddled them. It's hard for the authorities to know what to do because everything that maybe they have considered doing comes with a certain degree of risk. Luke in Barrhaven. Luke, you're on City News. Morning.
How's it going, sir?
Yeah, it goes. Yep, thank you. Go ahead, sir. Why are we in this mess? 11 days of this now.
I don't know. It boggles my mind because, they knew for over a week they were coming down to Ottawa from all ends of the country, right?
Yeah, it was on TV every night, right?
Yeah.
Now it's rolling through here, and now it's rolling through there, and look at the crowds on the highways, and da-da-da-da-da, right?
Yeah,
sure.
Like you were mentioning before about Canada, they know the crowds of Canada. They get prepared.
Yes, yeah.
They know the organizer, too. One of the organizers, Pat King, they know how he is. They know he doesn't bullcrap. They said they were going to come. They said they were going to stay, and they were going to stay until they got answers. Well, that's what they're doing. So why is it such a surprise? They should have been ready. They should have been.
Okay. And what would I'm just curious. Like, what would being ready look like? For example, in Toronto, they put up snowplows and they put up buses, so you couldn't get down certain routes and roads, and you couldn't get a truck anywhere close to Queen's Park if you wanted to go protest like at the actual physical building of Queen's Park. You had to walk there.
Yeah,
right?
They should have done that because look on Canada today. They fill up dump trucks with sand and they block the roads ready for everybody.
Yeah.
Why didn't they do that? Somebody dropped the ball. Somebody dropped the ball.
Okay.
All
right.
Like I said before, I'm a truck driver. I support these guys. Yes.
Okay.
Now they've been here too long.
Okay.
You're not going to get anywhere. You're not getting no answers from the federal government. Just go home.
All right.
What are you going to do?
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, sir. Yep. Bill in Ottawa. Bill, good morning. You're on City News.
Good morning, Rob.
Morning, Bill. Why do you think we're in this mess?
Well, I think it's been the mayor's strategy right from the get-go.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I think that the idea that you could just suspend law enforcement and hunker down and wait them out is just, this got us to this far.
Right.
And but he's leaving the residents of Ottawa to fend for themselves and cope with it the best they can.
Well, he has said, look, I'm the mayor. I can't tell the police what to do. I can't tell the police what to do.
Apparently he can. I think he did.
Oh, you think he did? Well, you'd never get him to say that.
Well,
you'd never get him to admit to it.
If it's up to the police chief, then it's on him because we're not doing his job.
Right.
But I agree. They should have prepared for this. They should have had enough officers on hand and taken control.
I mean, they knew it was coming. Like it was all over television, right? That this was coming to Ottawa.
It was coming.
And that it was going to be, in fairly large numbers, right?
Yep.
You put 100 trucks along Wellington Street, it's going to create some chaos.
Yeah, and all that horn blowing and bothering people all night long.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Bill.
Madness.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. He thinks, it's part of the mayor's strategy. 750-1310, 750-1310, back on a Monday here. Rick in Canada. Rick, why are we in this mess?
We shouldn't have been in this mess to begin with.
Okay.
Because if you look at the numbers, they're saying between 80 and 90% of the truck drivers were vaccinated. So that means there was somewhere between, I'm guessing, around 10% that still had to be vaccinated. But the Auditor General for Canada came out with a report on how well the government was doing at following their own rules with respect to people coming into Canada and getting tested as directed, going into quarantine as directed, and the government's supposed to make sure they're doing that. And in March, she cited a number of deficiencies involving tens of thousands of people. And she came out with the same report in December 2021, 8 months later, and said that the government had done no follow-up on any of her observations 8 months earlier, none whatsoever. And the government just kind of said, well, yeah, you're right, shrugged their shoulders and said, we'll try to do better. So they already had enough on their plates without introducing new rules for truck drivers.
A new mandate, yeah.
And that was low-hanging fruit, too. The only reason they did that is because there's a choke point where these guys cross back and forth on the border. So they have no problems following up on that because they can check them right there at the borders. But as far as anybody being told at the airport, well, make sure you quarantine and make sure you check in 3 days later to prove that you came back negative on a test.
Right. Were they going to follow up on that anyway? Because the evidence, the evidence suggested that they weren't going to bother with that anyway. Right.
Yeah, and the whole point is that involved way more people than the numbers involved with the truck drivers.
Yeah,
so they brought this whole mess on to themselves.
Yeah.
So whether the city was prepared or not prepared, et cetera, is not really the point here. Even the government themselves reversed their own decision, for crying out loud, because they couldn't decide whether they should go ahead with this additional set of rules or not.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
750-1310 on a Monday morning, day 11 of the protest in Ottawa. This is the Rob Snow Show, taking your calls on City News.
Opening a business especially in a pandemic, in that kind of situation, is very challenging. First, people don't know me, people don't know my product. To build a new clientele, to build a trust for them, to show them that I care about it. I do love my food. That was the biggest challenge. And of course, in all lockdown, we had to face it regards my employee, girls, ladies, what they work for me. I didn't want to tell them, sorry, I'm closed, I'm not having a job for you. No, they have families, they have kids to feed. So this is very important because we are family orientated. And we decided to open. We, of course, essential business. So been very tough, very, very tough, as we didn't see people on the road. Market was completely quiet, but we knew that we have to wait, and we knew that we're gonna be fine. In this town, we built online shop, Vedel Online, and we did Uber Eats, which one is picking up and is very, very popular. We have a really good feedback. So this is the song from my heart. And and we try to expand. I'm thinking about opening another location. So I want to make Vedel famous. I want to make the Vedel place to be for all the families with kids. Try the traditional food, what the grandparents cooked in the countries when they're from, or even Canadian people. They're more than welcome to come and try our famous pierogis. I try to be passionate about my food, organic food made with love, with all homemade, organic. So you can find food from all over the Europe: Polish, German, Ukrainian, Romanian, French, Armenian. So all kind of different types of food. Homemade lunches. We focus on the homemade lunches, grandma style. I keep always saying, like in my Genia Babcia house, how she cooked. I wanted this love and this food over here because I believe that will bring all people around me. And all the organic cold cuts, lovely selection of sausages, cheeses, European cheeses, great selections of mustards, French cookies. All what you need from Europe you can find here at the Vedel Touch of Europe. If you think good way, that's it. You have to. I had the option to cry in the corner and say, oh, pandemic is coming. No, you need to stand up and fight for it and have your eyes open, think outside of the box and do it.
Time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Why are we still in this position 11 days into this? And it's like a one-day wonder in Toronto. I don't know. It's kind of remarkable to me that the capital finds itself in this position. There's no other city in the country that just loves to be governed as much as Ottawa is governed. I mean, In Ottawa, we love to be governed. I mean, you look at government everywhere, right? And if you think government is supposed to be there as a force for good, to protect the vulnerable, to ensure peace, order, and good government, then boy, oh boy, Ottawa has been badly let down. Just look at the way this thing is dragged on for as long as it has. I mean, one of the few breaks I would give the city officials is that, we have Chief Slowly and Mayor Watson, powerful voices, just not, truckers. But I mean, you think about Elon Musk is the richest person in the world. He's tweeting all the time about this. Tucker Carlson, I don't know how many viewers that guy has a night on his show. It's like the most watched cable news show in the United States. Hannity tonight on Fox News is going to be all about the truckers convoy. Donald Trump, right? Still a force, probably try and launch a comeback. So, I mean, Trump, Tucker, Hannity, Elon, and we have Jim Watson and Peter Slowly. And somewhere a prime minister. Darren in Barhaven. Darren, good morning.
Hey, Rob, first-time caller. Love the show. Look forward to it every morning.
Very kind of you.
I want to actually.
Why are we in this mess?
Well, actually, I want to jump ahead because I've got my thoughts. I think that have been discussed most of last week, including with Professor Leon and with your panel that was on from 9:30 to 10. I want to jump forward in this whole idea of over governance. One of the things I think that should come out of all of this at the end, when it's all done and over, we're looking back, is it time to resurrect that discussion about the NCR becoming like the District of Ottawa-Gatineau? One police force, one fire department, one ambulance service, one snow clearing crew, the whole bit. Is it time, once again, I know Quebec is always against it because of the money that they would lose by having the federal buildings on the Gatineau side, but we're talking about the lack of planning. I didn't like the comment about the intelligence failure. Everybody knew this was coming. I refuse to believe that the city was not prepared, didn't know. I think there's some other constitutional issues that will come out of all of this in terms of what is a protest, what is legal, what is illegal. That's all this stuff is going to happen later on. But is it time to have that discussion again? About
that would become a federal district. We basically become a federal district.
Yeah,
a federal district.
Yeah. So whether, and I think it was about 20 years ago. It was around 2000, I think, when the province was realigning the municipal districts.
Okay.
I think it came up. So it's some balance between being having the provincial authority or being a federal district that it's its own entity.
But how would that have? Not necessarily prevented this, but maybe lessened its impact or made it easier to respond to if we were a federal district, because the response would have been more seamless. You think, Darren?
I think if we look back to the shooting at the Cenotaph and on Parliament Hill, one of the big things that came out of that was, and it's been talked about, how many police forces are downtown, right? You've got. The RCMP is responsible for certain parts. You've got Parliamentary Protective Services for the Hill. Yeah. You've got Ottawa Police Service responsible for the city. You've got OPP responsible for the highways.
Yeah.
If we were something more
across the river, you have the Gatineau Police. You have the Cyridated Quebec.
I don't think has really been mentioned much here, even though we have all the bridges across. I think then all of your planning, I think, becomes more seamless. Regardless, as you said, we put how many people on the Hill for Canada Day? This isn't new, except for the vehicles on 100,000 Street.
100,000 people.
So I think, to me, it's just one of those things. Regardless if you agree with the protest or not, and as a nation's capital, I'm surprised this kind of activity hasn't happened before. And that's why I don't want to get into all of the, if there's a court injunction, because how we handle these things, charter rights to protest, is it legal, illegal, but how much more seamless would a lot of this have been able to handle? Again, Toronto, Quebec, some of these other Vancouver that had demos. I don't know if Vancouver had one, but yeah, they cleared out in a day.
Yeah.
There's the message. There it is. I think because they were self-contained within that city. So even though they're within the city, as you said, like we are so over-governed, right?
Yeah.
Is there another solution that we're not looking at right now?
They're here because they want to confront the Prime Minister. Right, but the person speaking back to them is the mayor of Ottawa.
Yes,
and they're like, "Yeah, we don't care. You're the mayor of Ottawa."
But we know at our level, right? Mayor Watson has no authority over some of these things. The province doesn't have authority. Like, the whole issue of the pandemic has different layers of responsibility. So. That's just like parking all of that. Just the fact that we have this kind of large event. Is there a more seamless way to manage these events in the future?
Okay, thank you. Great call. Great call. I hope you'll call back sometime. Mo, Canada, you're on City News. Mo.
Good morning, Rob.
Hi, Mo. Why are we in this mess? Mo?
I think we in this just because the Attorney General of Ontario did not say anything about it. He knew there was something coming. And he didn't consult the city, didn't consult the OBB. This is how we're going to deal with this. He had a week at least, or 2 weeks to prepare. And it's still, until this day, he haven't said, or they never said anything in his office.
Okay, so...
I don't know if you remember, Rob. I'm going to take you back for a while back. You remember Waco, Texas?
Waco, sure. Yeah. The Branch Davidians, Yeah, the Branch Davidians,
It was the Attorney General of the United States because the FBI...
Janet Reno, yeah.
I do believe they had intelligence. We're not short for intelligence. We have good intelligence, but they didn't follow that. They thought it's just a bunch of truckers. They will leave.
Right.
It didn't work.
Okay.
And I appreciate it for your time, for giving me. I think that's the sad part is that office failed from the citizen of the city of Ottawa.
All right. Okay, Mo. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure that there are things that, people in higher office with the appropriate security clearings know things that we don't know. I'm sure that's the case. But we have reached halftime. Irene and Jennifer, I get to your calls right after the news on the Talkback Hour. I've been away since, Wednesday of last week. So it's good to be back with you, debating the biggest story in town, biggest story in the country, the protest. You're on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
There's always a story behind the story.
Uncover more and dig into the core of the issue.
Discover
City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, February 7th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, -8 degrees. Smith Falls, -3. Here's what's making news this hour. The countdown is on for a special council meeting. The mayor calling for 1 o'clock this afternoon. Jim Watson wants councillors to discuss the ongoing protest in the downtown, which does seem a lot more calm today compared to the weekend and a lot less people. Ottawa police did begin the crackdown on people supplying protesters with things like fuel for their trucks yesterday. While the province says it has done everything the city has asked to deal with this 10-day protest, the opposition Liberals say more could be done. Stephen Del Duca says the province should also declare a state of emergency, as the city has done, and the Attorney General should move to start seizing protesters' vehicles. He says that is within the minister's mandate. As COVID restrictions at long-term care homes loosen a bit today, the province is reporting another reduction in the number of people in hospital, down today by 75 from yesterday. Now, the number of people in ICU remaining steady since yesterday at 486. 4 medals today in Beijing for Canada: gold and bronze in men's snowboard slopestyle, bronze in women's 500-meter speed skating, and bronze in team ski jumping. Not only is that a new event for this year's Games, but it's the first medal in ski jumping for any North American country in the history of the Winter Games. City News Time, 10:31. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Why are we in this mess 11 days into this in the city of Ottawa? Said NBC News on here, the CNBC, and they had their NBC News update. And, you know, this was one of the headlines. It's a global story. And some of the reporting kind of portrays Ottawa as the epicenter of a movement, if you want to call that. It's a movement. And the movement is, you know, whatever you want it to be. For unvaccinated truckers, it's about their ability to earn a living. And, you know, that may have been what started this protest a few weeks ago, but you could say it's moved beyond that now. If it's a movement, I guess it's all in the eyes of the beholder now. It's in the eyes of the participant now. You know, some want the government replaced or defeated or overthrown. Don't want to bother with, you know, minor inconveniences like elections because, you know, freedom. Some see conspiracies everywhere. Some, I'm talking about a minority, right? Every word, every action. They see it as just another advancement in some kind of conspiracy. Globalists, big pharma, the two in cahoots, take your pick, whatever. I mean, the QAnon queen was there. I didn't even know we had a Canadian QAnon queen, but apparently we have a Canadian QAnon queen trying to burn the Canadian flag because freedom. And everywhere you look, right, politicians are trying to seize on the chaos for purely political purposes. When the convoy was first rolling into the city Friday, Saturday of last week, a lot of people were telling me they took deep offense to Mr. Trudeau's characterization of this convoy as a fringe minority. And that still resonates today, that term fringe minority. Heard that over and over and over again. A lot of people who probably never saw themselves as the protesting type or even political people. Boy, that comment really, it set a lot of people off. It did. And, you know, the next thing you know, they're standing out on a highway overpass on a cold winter's day waving the Canadian flag, saying, you go. I don't know if this convoy would have the same number of supporters lining highways now, just given everything that's happened in the last week and a half. But whatever this was supposed to be a couple of weeks ago, I don't think it's that anymore. It's kind of taken on a life of its own, and it's manifest in any number of grievances that have built up over the last 23 months. And Ottawa's kind of the epicenter for it all. But it's far from the only protests we've seen. Lots of rallies, protests, whatever you want to call them, in all kinds of Canadian cities from coast to coast over the weekend. But they don't match what's happening in Ottawa. The Toronto protest was a one-day wonder. Similar story in Quebec. They came, they left, they say they might come back. The Coots, Alberta thing is still going on. Important border crossing, southern Alberta. Protests in BC, in Halifax, in Edmonton. They don't come close to what's happening here in Ottawa. So why are we in this mess? Irene in Ottawa. Irene.
I just have two things I'd like to bring up, Rob.
Yeah.
One of them was, remember the movement they had the past year or two about defund the police?
Defund the police, yeah.
They didn't want money going, like they wanted to move the money elsewhere. And I thought the City of Ottawa police, they were begging for money to hire more officers. So maybe the Ottawa police doesn't have enough manpower because of this political defund the police. And another thing I'd like to bring up is where's our the safety minister, Bill Blair, and Dominic LeBlanc? To me, they come across as the enforcers for the Liberal government when they went after Doug Ford and Jason Kenney, where are they now?
Okay.
Because this is this is something like they didn't just come from the Ontario region. They came from BC and Alberta and Newfoundland.
Oh, yeah, all across the country, yeah.
All across the country. So why is Jim Watson the one that has to solve this issue when really it's a federal issue? Like, I thought Bill Blair, he comes across...
See, this is one of the problems. They're here to protest against Justin Trudeau, rightly or wrongly, since a lot of these mandates, and restrictions are provincially mandated, right? So they're here to yell at Trudeau, and they get Jim Watson's voice back at them. And they don't care what Jim Watson has to say, really.
No, I kind of agree with them because, Bill Blair and Dominic LeBlanc, I see them as Justin Trudeau's the enforcers.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And they come across as bullies, I find, when it comes to anything with the provinces. And the other thing is that I'm kind of not surprised at the reaction of the federal when our prime minister, he's the one that says, budgets balance themselves. So I'm of the opinion he's just going to let everyone else take care of it and let it, fizzle out.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Irene. Yep.
Bye.
Okay. Jennifer, let's go to Jennifer in Ottawa. Jennifer, you're on City News. Jennifer, why are we in this mess 11 days later?
So this is my first time calling ever.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, first, I was listening to the talk about, I was listening to Alex Cullen, and I think we're in this mess for a lot of different reasons. This protest is different than other protests we've had.
Yeah.
So I think it should be handled differently, and I think that's what the police and the mayor have done. We've been in a world pandemic for 2 years. People are tired, and I think that Jim Watson and the police, their hearts are in the right place. They wanted people to be able to be peaceful and express themselves and stuff like that. It's been hard on everybody.
Yeah.
And it's been hard on Jim Watson, and he's done a good job. Nobody's perfect. The other thing is the police. There is not enough manpower to control the amount of protesters that are down there. But the thing is that they've maintained safety. They're not people going around and lighting buildings on fire, or somebody pulling out a gun and shooting, policemen or somebody else getting shot. And yes, it's time for the truckers to go now. But I just think that people are being...
Do you think largely, Jennifer, they've been able to maintain the peace? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I do. And you always get these...
rogue elements? Is that what you're...
Yeah, these people that are,
I know what you mean. I think everyone knows what you mean.
You know that, but I can hear the horns honking, kind of where I live, and I kind of drove down just to see it. But in general, they're it's okay. And I believe the police should ticket people for doing unlawful things, absolutely. But as long as people are being peaceful, but it is time to go because it is affecting the people in the downtown core. But I also think that Trudeau, I'm actually pretty disappointed because he should come out and at least acknowledge the protesters' feelings.
Right.
And he's seeing people, and he's our leader. Whether it's not my job, it's their job, but he should come out. He's the leader of our country, and he should acknowledge the feelings for those for the people of Canada, and at least to say something, But I think slowly and like people criticizing, I just think the pandemic's been very hard on everybody, and I'm a frontline worker, nurse, and I'm seeing it firsthand. Do I think the truckers should be mandated to be vaccinated? That wouldn't be my focus because they're kind of like by themselves. But so that's
okay.
That's
Thank you,
my
Jennifer.
opinion.
No, look, I really appreciate the call and all the work that you're doing there. Thank you. I mean, I'm trying to come up with this actionable question this morning, and all I can write on my computer screen is, how did we get into this mess? I mean, how? Right? How did we get to the point where the mayor has to declare a state of emergency again? We have multi-million-dollar lawsuits flying here, there, and everywhere. The shack. When did they build that shack, David? Was that a Friday thing or a Thursday thing or something? Like, they just, man, oh man, they're like the Amish farmers, who you call when you need a barn built, and they build the barn in like 24 hours or something. It's just like incredible.
It was reminiscent,
right,
of that. I don't know if they had any Amish down there.
They took it down. They moved it to, I love this, the staging area. Right, the staging area where they had the raid last night. And I'm like, the staging area is the parking lot of the baseball stadium? Like, who owns the baseball stadium? The city of Ottawa owns the baseball stadium, right? Fully functioning kitchen, porta potties, provisions that look like they could last for weeks, right? And I mean, serious protesters who are ready to call home for, quote unquote, as long as it takes, right? So why are we in this mess? Alex in Canada. Alex, good morning. You're on City News, Alex.
Hey, Rob.
Hi, Alex. Why are we in this mess? 11 days, Alex, this has been going on.
My parents immigrated from Egypt when I was 12.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first got to Canada, I read this book. It was called Animal Farm by George Orwell, and it's a flashback. The socialists can't stand, the elite socialists can't stand middle class Canadians now fed up and voicing their opinion. They will do everything to shut them down, but they will not address any of the issues. You will never hear them talk about the issues. They'll talk about lawsuits. They'll talk about giving the police powers to do this and that, but they'll never talk about our issues that we're trying to address. And King Trudeau didn't even bother to address anything. In a strong, free society,
yeah,
it's the government that serves the people, not the other way around.
Sure.
If we, I love this country so much. I fought on the battlefield for this country. And I am seriously worried because the signs I'm seeing is exactly how despotic rulers operate. And Canada is a beautiful country. We don't want a tyrant to destroy it. So, Canadians have to be pretty pissed off for other middle-class Canadians to get a movement that's now is imitating across the world. And there's grievances, and they're not being addressed.
Yeah, grievances, yeah. Okay, all right, Alex. Okay, just hold on a second, everybody. Mr. Singh is the NDP leader. It's going to be a day of politicians of all stripes. You've already heard from the Ontario Liberal leader. Later on, there's a council meeting, and there'd be a lot of speechifying there. And Mr. Singh is calling on Mr. Trudeau to come up with some kind of plan to deal with the convoy here in Ottawa.
So this cannot continue. And so there's lots of tools that we have at the federal level that we need to use to prevent foreign money being used to interfere with our democracy.
Prochaine question, Juliane Lapointe de Radio-Canada.
Okay, let's leave that. He switches into French and takes a question from French CBC. In fact, why don't we stop and then we'll all have lots of time together on the other side of our commercial break. Michelle and Russell, Jamie, Mark, take all your calls. Rob Snow Show, City News.
The past few years of time.
When you've lost your breasts, you've sort of lost part of yourself. And then all at once, you're losing your hair. You don't know who you are anymore. You want to feel like yourself again. So I think that the store, a mastectomy store, is essential because you've lost your identity. And then all at once, you're looking for a wig, you need a headscarf, you need a camisole. There's nowhere to go. There's no one to talk to. This should be essential because there are more and more women that are getting breast cancer. I think it's 1 in 6. They're becoming younger. I have a client that's 18 years old. And where do they go? They need a place like this that the women that work there understand. They know what you're going through. It's changed quite a bit. Our hours are different. We're now open from 10 to 5. We're not as busy as we were. A lot of women are afraid to go out. They're afraid that maybe there are more people in the store. So that's why I try and let them know you are alone. There's absolutely nobody in the store except you and I. If there is a woman that she's very afraid, I will lock the door to make sure nobody else comes in. I'll put a sign back in 10, 15 minutes just to give her that reassurance. Before we would have 4, 5, 6 people in the store. We didn't have to turn anybody away. Now we do. Some clients do leave and they're upset because they're in the store. They said, you know, we drove 20 minutes and now we're not allowed in the store. And I try to make them understand that there's somebody in here that's going through chemo or radiation. So that's sort of changed a lot, that we're not able to have more people in the store.
If we're talking about products, there's the bras that are adapted for mastectomy. The bathing suits that are adapted to mastectomy. We have special camisoles as well, and post-surgery bras. And then we have, for women going through chemo, the wigs that we have a big selection in the store as well. We have scarves. Some women don't feel comfortable wearing a wig. They prefer to wear a scarf or a hat, so we have a huge selection of that as well. We offer compression garments as well. When you're going through a mastectomy, you might have lymphedema in your arms after a couple of years, and you have flare-ups. So we have the sleeves, the hand as well that can be covered. We show each other's our scar. We talk about the treatments, how we felt, and I guess that's what they're looking for here. That's what makes us special. We have an added value in this store. Besides everything that's in the store, that's a product that can handle any problem that a client might have. Me and Linda, we've been through. We know how it feels in our bodies.
Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Okay. So the mayor said a few things today. Well, first of all, he declared the state of emergency last night, and then this morning suggested that maybe Mr. Trudeau should appoint a federal mediator, an honest broker who could somehow negotiate an end to this. So the mayor has had his say on this, and will have more to say, I'm sure, during the 1 o'clock emergency city council meeting. Mr. Singh is the leader of the federal New Democrats. He's doing a news conference right now. Do you still have a feed of that? Or yeah? No? Yeah? No? Yeah? I'm still taking questions in French. All right. So Mr. Singh is saying, look, we've had protests in every city now. Every provincial capital has basically had a protest. Where's Mr. Trudeau? You know, good question. It's national in scope. It's time for some kind of a federal government plan here to deal with this, which is a legitimate point. Mr. Del Duca, I mean, the unofficial election campaign is already underway here in the province of Ontario. Of an election in the first week of June in the province of Ontario. So all of this is wrapped up in provincial politics, election politics. And this is Mr. Del Duca, the Liberal leader, this morning.
Today, I'm outlining 3 steps that I believe Doug Ford should be taking right now urgently. I think that we need to declare a provincial state of emergency. This is how serious the situation is. I'll call it protesters or the protest organizers to be on the hook for paying the policing costs that are mounting each and every single day. That prosecutors here in the province of Ontario would use every tool in their toolkit, every tool available to make sure that a strong message was being sent, including the seizing or the forfeiture of property, including trucks. It's time for these occupiers to go home.
Occupiers, okay. All right, that's Stephen Del Duca. He, again, he's the Liberal leader. He's talking about seizing trucks and a province-wide state of emergency. A province-wide state of emergency. I mean, you could be in, whatever. Thunder Bay, nowhere near the 6-block downtown radius of Ottawa's downtown core, unaffected by this totally, and yet live under a state of emergency. Okay. Michelle, Ottawa South. Hi, Michelle.
Good morning. To
Hi.
that, I say the Liberal MPs need to get rid of their inept leader. And I support Chief Foley, if only for the reason he is quickly becoming another fall person for Justin Trudeau's inept leadership. Rob, when all this is over, let's see where Jimmy goes. I've never seen so much of Jimmy when there wasn't a ribbon or finger sandwiches and TV and handed out. Friday morning, I watched Susanna Marchand at lunch ask Jim, why wasn't the chief ready? And Jimmy proceeds to gobbledygook an answer, and Suanna forcibly shuts him down and said, Mr. Slowly was paid to know basically what to do. Oh, the hypocrisy all over. And it's so interesting to see how the affirmative action celebrated chief is upsetting these people. I think he's doing a great job. Friday morning, I called to say the same thing, and I stand behind it. He's been put in an impossible situation. And all of this guilt by association that they're singing, Omar Al-Gabar, our Minister of Transportation, and our Minister of Public Safety and Emergencies, Marco Mendocino and Jim Watson, guilt by association. Hey, what about SNC-Lavalin? And what about that $150 million you gave them to build a building for the COVID crisis? What's going on with that?
Right.
Guilt by association.
All right.
Be careful what brush you paint everybody with. And that is what's precisely upsetting everybody, Rob.
You think the chief was put in an impossible situation and he's being made a fall guy?
Absolutely.
That's an interesting. It's an interesting. I don't know if a lot of people view it that way, Michelle. But knowing you, I know a lot of people don't view the world the way you do. You have a very unique take on the world, and I don't necessarily mean that in a mean way. Okay, don't get me wrong. But there are a lot of questions about the response from the Ottawa police. I think the police have learned a lesson here the hard way. It's pretty easy to let 100 trucks into your downtown core. It's a lot harder to get rid of them. A lot harder to get rid of them. And everything that goes along with that. The honking of the horns, the bullying, the drunkenness, the taunting, the generally boorish behavior, the horns blaring, the fireworks being set off. You can't ignore that. It's a big part of the story. It's a big part of the story. Let's take this line on the Gatineau side. Mark. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Rob.
Yeah, Mark. Why are we in this mess, Mark? Why are we in this mess?
Well, to be honest, simple answer to that is the government hasn't really come to the table and negotiated in any meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
If they wanted to try and de-escalate the situation instead of calling everybody the fringe and all the talking points that have been said, just come to a meeting, give these people a sort of voice to feel like they've been heard, and that would take a lot of air out of this bubble that's just getting more and more inflated. Instead, they're just letting these guys continue their, as you said, boorish behavior. However, if you sort of come to the table and make them feel heard at the very least, it would take a lot of air out of this.
All right.
And in response with the police, what they're doing, there's a lot of these talks about these people trying to light apartment buildings on fire and these crazy acts, instead of, I thought it was like innocent till proven guilty, and they're automatically being associated with the protests. That's one thing I really take issue with, is there are criminals that are in Ottawa and that are citizens of Ottawa, and why aren't
you're talking about this? There's a series of tweets alleging that some of the convoy protesters tried to light an apartment building on fire. Yeah. I saw that this morning. But
how are they associated right away with the protests? There should be criminal investigations. Absolutely.
Yeah, and as I understand it, and it's right there. It's right there in the series of tweets that the head of the arson investigation unit from the Ottawa Police is going to look into that. I assume they're looking into it to see if there's any connection. And even if there's not a connection, you want to catch people who are lighting fires in the hallways of apartment buildings anyway.
Exactly.
Whether they're protesters or not. But I understand a pretty quick leap from A to B. Fair enough. Russell in Ottawa. Russell, you're on City News. Russell,
good morning, Rob. How are you doing?
It's a big mess, Russell. Why are we in this big mess here?
Well, it's squarely on Trudeau.
On Trudeau, okay.
Absolutely. If he would have came and talked to these people long before this convoy got to Ottawa, he would have resolved the convoy. Even being heard, This is a government that does not hear its people. And I don't know how much international media you've been looking at. It looks very bad on Canada and the world, or in the world right now. Horrible.
Well, I think, whether anything can be solved from Trudeau going to speak to people, I think he made a critical error in bringing in that vaccine mandate for truckers in the first place.
Correct.
He was advised not to do that. He was, not by people who are anti-vaxxer, but by people who are in the trucking industry. We had the head of the Trucking Alliance on saying, don't do this. We're already short of truckers in this country, right?
Well,
the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, these people are led by, serious business people who were saying you should not go ahead with this. And it just, their interest was commerce, but it lit the fuse, I think, right? Yeah. It lit this fuse. And really, as a public health measure, done in the interest of public health, what has it achieved?
Nothing.
Has it really limited the spread of Omicron in any meaningful way?
No.
The cases are down. The hospitalizations are down. Just where's the evidence that this has been effective? I don't know.
The bet was political posturing on his part. Yeah.
Okay.
But
thank you.
And on second note, very quickly, Diane Deans, Councillor Deans, has compared the convoy to terrorists. I take huge issue with how loosely people throw that definition around. Sure, there's the outside edge of this, just like everything else in society. It's a bell curve. There's extremes on one end on the other. But I don't remember anybody talking when Black Lives Matter were setting bombs off in the States and Trudeau was marching with them.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. We're right at a time. Overtime, as a matter of fact. I suspect, look, we're going to be talking about this all week, right? This will be the story, unless it somehow just peacefully ends and everybody goes home tomorrow, which none of us really think is going to happen. So ongoing coverage. After the 11 o'clock news, we can take some calls tomorrow. Talkback hour, 10 to 11 every morning here on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
March 1st. Is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News. Now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, February 7th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, minus 8 degrees in Ottawa, Smiths Falls minus 3. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Growing calls for federal action to try and end this convoy protest taking place in our downtown that has spilled to other cities across Canada. Here's City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
The federal NDP is calling for an emergency debate in the House of Commons on the convoy protest, and Leader Jagmeet Singh says he wants to see a plan from the feds to address this, expressing concerns about foreign interference in our democracy and saying the Prime Minister needs to reach out to municipalities impacted. But Singh is not prepared to back something Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson is calling for when he told CTV he wants the feds to appoint a mediator to negotiate with the convoy organizers.
Well, we've taken the position that this is not a group of people. The organizers have made it clear their intention is to overthrow the government. And these are people that are not, the organizers are certainly not people that we can have that type of discourse with.
Experts have previously told us negotiating with the convoy may be a problem since it would appear to legitimize their illegal tactics and could embolden future demonstrators to try and lock down the city again if they think it will lead to talks with the feds. We're also expecting today a ruling from a judge on an injunction attempt to stop the horn honking, and the Ottawa City Council is holding an emergency meeting to discuss their state of emergency. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
Now at the civic level, as Cormac mentioned, the special council meeting is scheduled to get underway at 1 o'clock this afternoon. It was called last week. A single item on the agenda, the impact of the truck convoy demonstration on city residents and businesses. Now, the provincial Liberal leader says the Premier should take a couple of direct actions to end this convoy protest. Stephen Del Duca says the province should do the first one immediately.
We need to declare a provincial state of emergency. This is how serious the situation is. We can't wait until something else occurs in Ottawa and then react at the last second.
The Liberal leader also says seize the assets of protesters like their trucks. Del Duca says the provincial attorney general does have the power to take that step. City News Time 11:03, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
For Ottawa, the Valley, Smiths Falls, any flurries this morning won't last long. Generally mainly cloudy. More flurries return tonight, though. The high today -2, -9 for the low, and tomorrow chance of flurries once again. The high -1. For today, the high -2.
And right now in Ottawa, -8. In Smiths Falls, it's -3 degrees. As COVID restrictions at long-term care homes loosen a bit today, the province reporting another reduction in the number of people in hospital, down by 75 from yesterday. The number of people in ICU, though, has remained steady today at 486. Just over 2,000 new COVID cases across the province, 138 in Ottawa, 36 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 21 more in Eastern Ontario, 9 new cases in Renfrew. City News Time, 11:04.
The Beijing 2022 Olympic Games.
4 medals today for Canada in Beijing. Gold and bronze in men's snowboard slope style, bronze in women's 500-meter speed skating, and bronze in team ski jumping. Not only is that a new event, team ski jumping, for this year's games, but it is the first medal in ski jumping ever won by a North American country in the history of the Winter Games. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
1011 FM
and 1310 AM.
My good friend Geoffrey Johnston is back with me. He is a columnist with the Kingston Whig-Standard, with us every Monday morning. Good morning, Geoffrey.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. I'm going to ask you the same question that I was asking the callers during our talkback hour in the last hour. It's been 11 days. Why are we in this mess here in Ottawa? 11 days into this. Why are we in this mess? Geoffrey.
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, just let me start by saying, Kingston, Ontario, because I write for the Whig-Standard, has had problems in the past with large street parties and students. And I guarantee you, after 11 days, this wouldn't be going on in the city of Kingston. Let's put it that way. How do we get into this? Well, I do think that there is and I agree with the Prime Minister, it's a fringe, because most Canadians have understood that the COVID-19 crisis is a once-in-a-lifetime crisis, and that one of the ways out of it is through vaccination, but also, we need to wear masks and we need to have this layered approach. And they're just, it would seem that there is a determined fringe minority that doesn't want any public health protections in place. I don't call them restrictions, I call them protections, because COVID-19 has killed, approximately 5 million people around the world. The actual death toll is probably much higher. We've had, over close to 70,000, I believe, in Canada die of it. We just came through the Omicron wave. We may be facing a new offshoot of Omicron in the very near future, but we're seeing it in Europe right now, which is even more contagious than Omicron. So when we have vaccines and masks, it makes no sense to not use these things and protect the most vulnerable people and, ordinary healthy people and children. And so we have this transnational movement, and that's what it is, because we're seeing protests around the world at various times. We've seen them in the Netherlands, we've seen them in Italy, we've seen them in France, and now we're seeing foreign money coming into Canada. And over the weekend, as we all saw, we saw various American...
Yeah, it's interesting how this... I'm sorry, Geoffrey. It's interesting how this has become one of the other angles of this story, the foreign funding of various political movements or protest movements, right? Because this was... certainly a long an accusation in the environmental movement that a lot of the opposition to Canada's oil and gas industry was foreign funded.
Yeah, so
that it was foreign environmental organizations that were largely out to demonize, if not destroy, totally landlocked Canadian energy. And, that was an allegation that largely fell on deaf ears or was mocked or ridiculed. And yet now some are demanding investigations into the foreign funding of a protest.
Yeah, although they did the investigation in Alberta, and it didn't really turn up anything substantial. We should say that. But over the weekend, as you know, GoFundMe suspended didn't just suspend, canceled the GoFundMe $10 million money that had been raised for the convoy. Yeah. And we had Senator Ted Cruz saying that there should be an investigation. You had various attorney generals, Texas and West Virginia, and others saying
the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis,
the governor of Florida,
kind of a Trump disciple, right?
Good patriotic Americans have given money to this campaign for Canadian truckers, and that I think burns a lot of Canadian ears, because what are they doing giving money to something that is actually possibly destabilizing Canada? On the weekend, we saw former U.S. ambassador to Canada, Bruce Heyman, who is always a good friend of Canada, said unequivocally, the United States should not be funding any sort of campaign that could destabilize or cause problems for Canada. This is just not on, and I think this is rather shocking. And as you said to me earlier in an email, we're seeing interference from other American figures. Elon Musk last week, the big Tesla guy, came out in favor of the truckers. You've got Fox News basically spreading propaganda about all this. I had a friend who lives in the States. He's an academic, and he contacted me, and he wanted to know what was happening in all this, because, the American news doesn't really cover it properly. And I told him, basically, I just gave him the thumbnail sketch of everything, and he goes, well, that's not the word we're getting in the United States. For them, it's just this blue-collar, organic thing. And I had to tell him about the various extremists who, well before the protests, had these extreme far-right connections, and he didn't know about any of that. So there are other dimensions. So you may have some Americans who innocently are giving to a blue-collar movement.
I guess my point is on that, Geoffrey, it's kind of not a fair fight. Here's little Ottawa, the sleepy little government town of 1 million people, and we have a nice, friendly mayor named Jim Watson, and kind of I would say a wonkish kind of police chief. Talks more like a postdoctoral candidate than what you would picture as like a tough as nails police chief in Chief Slowly. But nevertheless, in addition to that, so that's on one side. Even though they're here to protest Trudeau, that's who they get back is the chief of police for Ottawa and the mayor of Ottawa. They were here protesting Trudeau. It's clear. But on the other side, as you say, you have Tucker Carlson, like one of the most watched, for better or worse, one of the most watched cable news shows in the world, right? The Hannity show, I'm told today, is all about this, the protest in Ottawa. You have Elon Musk, richest person in the world. I'll get David to look it up. Look up Elon Musk, how many Twitter followers Elon Musk has. And Donald Trump, the former president, who still commands tens of millions of admirers, followers, right? So these are powerful forces to try and counter if you're in a public relations war. Chief Slowly and Jim Watson against Carlson, Hannity, Musk, and Trump. My gosh, it's not hardly a fair fight,
Canada, in our Constitution, it says peace, order, and good government, whereas we're facing off in some ways against the MAGA movement. We're up against a Trump and his acolytes like Ted Cruz. And Donald Trump, 10 days ago in a speech, said that he admitted that he tried to overturn the 2020 presidential election, and Mike Pence, to his credit, finally came out and said that Mike Pence, the vice president, did not have the power to overturn the election. But that's who we're facing now. And I'll say this about what's going on in Ottawa. When a municipal government can no longer enforce bylaws due to an occupation, it becomes something more nefarious than a mere protest. When occupiers, and that's what's going on, can flout law and order, and they can set up an alternative society within a city, harass residents. The government of Ottawa has been usurped. When a movement occupies a city and usurps the authority of duly elected government, a state of insurrection, a virtual state of insurrection exists. That's what's happening now in Ottawa.
You think there's an insurrection in Ottawa?
Really? Okay, so you have the police chief saying that basically they're afraid to clear out the protesters because weapons have been brought into the city. And for the longest time, they decided they were just going to, try to contain it and maybe de-escalate it. Well, there's a problem right there when you're saying the police chief.
Okay, then if that has happened to the municipality, then what is the responsibility of the provincial government, for example? You have the Liberal leader this morning is saying we should go in there, we should declare a state of emergency across the entire province of Ontario. I don't know if we need a state of emergency in Brockville, where you are, or in Kingston. This isn't affecting Kingston or Brockville, right? We should go in there and seize property. He says we should just go in there and seize vehicles. I don't know. Where's the Prime Minister? Where is he? He's been quiet for 10 days, right?
I will say that the Toronto police learned some from what was done wrong in Ottawa.
Oh, I would say so, yeah.
So they brought out the big buses and they blocked Hospital Row, and they were actually much more proactive. Also, the citizens of Toronto came out. You had healthcare workers standing, 200 healthcare workers standing in front of the hospitals. You had lots of citizens on the street doing counter-protests, peaceful counter-protests. And so they sent the protesters in Toronto a very clear message that this was not on. This was not going to happen in their city. As far as Ottawa goes, the Premier should at some point, I believe, make a request of National Defence to mobilize the Canadian Armed Forces so that they're ready at some point if the Ottawa Police needs the backup to help clear the protesters, because we're already seeing in Ottawa some things have been done right over the weekend. They're now trying to cut off the supply of diesel fuel to the trucks. They're going to. I was wondering why they weren't doing that a long time ago. They've got to cut off all the fuel, and then they've got to start to cut off the food and the supplies that are getting to the protesters. You've got to make this really uncomfortable for them. Try to basically wear them out and tire them out. If that doesn't work, then you've got to go to the next step, which would be to use actual force to remove them, because this can't go on for weeks or months.
All right.
There's just no way they can allow this to go on forever.
Okay. All right. I'm sending them your email. I know you're always so provocative in your opinions, and I'm sure there are many people who would love to talk to you about them. Geoffrey, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Geoffrey Johnston with the Kingston Whig-Standard. Okay, we're going to move away from convoy coverage for a little bit. We're going to take a look at some of the local business news with our friend David Sali from the Ottawa Business Journal. A welcome reprieve. He's on the Rob Snow Show next here on City News.
Papa Jack was started 14 years ago, really by accident more than anything. A friend of mine had bought a grocery store. A popcorn machine was in there. He didn't want it. I ended up by buying it. My family thought I was nuts. When I first said, come and pick up this popcorn machine, my son said, what the heck for? I won't use exact words. But anyway, we started, and it just kept on growing and growing. But at the time, I was the only one selling popcorn in Ottawa. But we persevered as a family, and here we are. So it's been very, very rewarding for my family and myself. And to see our brand name, Papa Jack, and Papa Jack came out of, I wanted something that was going to be very bilingual. So Papa, and then in Ontario, everybody called me Jack, even though my name is Jacques. In Quebec, it's fine, it's Jacques, but in Ontario, it was always Jack. So we married the two together, Papa, Jack. With the store that we have on Thurston Drive, it basically, the factory's in the back. If you come into the store, you can see how the popcorn is being made during the week. So it adds an extra layer of, you can see the sanitation, you can see how we do it. It's not like making popcorn. Most people thought when I started this, I was making popcorn in my garage or in my basement. No, never did. It was started in this building, in the back of the building, and then we kept growing and growing until what we have now. My daughter and my son came up with a brilliant idea to do a fundraiser online. So basically all people have to do is to register here, and we give them a special code number. And with that code number, they tell their friends or their neighbors, everybody, to buy online from us with that code number. And then at the end of each period, could be 2 weeks, could be a month, then we'll pay them a 20% of all the businesses that we got through that code number. One thing I'd like to say is thank you to all the Ottawa people who have supported us and support local businesses. It sometimes people, they talk about buying locally. Now it becomes that much more important to buy locally, to support your local businesses, because not too many of them are going to survive this. We're fortunate that we're so far so good.
The opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Every Monday we're joined by David Sali from the Ottawa Business Journal. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
I want to know what you single-handedly have been doing to try and end this occupation in Ottawa from your perch in the newsroom at the Ottawa Business Journal, David. My goodness, it's quite a state of affairs in the capital city, but your team has been working on it, putting out calls Very interesting, putting out calls to some prominent Ottawa lawyers, getting their thoughts on businesses who may want to launch legal action, for example, for lost business. So, what are they telling you?
Yeah, well, exactly, Rob. It's as you say, it's been interesting times lately for hundreds of businesses in the downtown core, and one of the things they have to kind of grapple with are some of the potential legal issues that legal avenues that they could pursue. If the protests continue, and so I did talk to last week a couple of very prominent commercial lawyers here in town, Craig O'Brien from Nelligan Law, and Aaron Rubinoff from Purley Roberts and Hill and McDougall. Just that I wanted to get their thoughts kind of on what, how feasible would it be for business owners, say in the core, the barbershop that's had to close down for days on end, for example, to sue some of these protesters for lost income if they could be identified by, say, the load on their trucks or whatnot. And it's kind of one of those things where, like a lot of legal issues, it's not really cut and dried, and it's not necessarily a smooth or easy road. The bottom line is this would be an uphill battle for businesses if they did want to try and sue protesters for lost income. It's a bit easier if, say, you've got someone caught on video smashing a window, for example, to sue them for damages. But when it comes to lost income, that's a bit of a different story because as Craig O'Brien told me, courts are they generally have a pretty significant tolerance for protests when it comes to these sort of things. And in terms of the bar is pretty high for having to establish liability and being able to prove that it was in fact the protests that caused the lost income, especially in a situation right now where we're just coming out of another sustained lockdown. How do you separate, was it the lockdowns that caused the lost income? Was it the protests? How do you differentiate between the two? And it's a real thorny issue there. And you add into that the costs of launching legal action. And even if you wanted to do a class action suit, it's those costs are prohibitive. And it would really, if you're a small business, you're looking at potentially a legal bill. I was told about approaching $100,000 or maybe more by the time a case, ever made it to court and got. Exactly. And you did get.
Yeah, let me read a quote. Let me read a quote from Mr. O'Brien again, from Nelligan Law, as you mentioned, right? Yeah. Quote. This type of litigation, it's incredibly complicated, he said. I would not engage in that lightly. For it to make any sense for a business to go down this road, the damages awarded would have to be high. And, there are so many questions. We had Emilie Taman on this morning from Champ Law, and they're doing this class action lawsuit. Right. And, the most, I think she said that a resident could get, is it's something like, like $200 a day or something like that. Yeah. So that's it, Robbie. You think about it. If it's going to cost you at least $100,000 just to get this thing to court, you would have to be looking at, as Craig and Aaron said, like weeks and weeks of lost business to really sort of justify spending that amount to try and get any money back. So it's likely not. And depending on what sort of revenue strata are you in as well? Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah, for sure. So not easy. Not easy at all. Probably prohibitive.
It could happen if this thing drags on longer, but right now it's still a road that I think a lot of business owners would be loath to try and navigate at this point.
All right. Okay. Boy, it's terrible, though, if you do feel sorry for the businesses. So, they were, a lot of them had been scuttled for so long, and then to be able to open up, the ones that were facing the lockdown to be finally able to open up at 50% capacity, only to decide some of them it's not worth being open.
Well,
right? So,
I know, exactly. It's adding insult to injury, if you will, for sure. And it's not easy. And then, of course, there's one other thing I wanted to mention, that say you do win a settlement, well, that doesn't necessarily mean you're ever going to see a dime of that settlement. I mean, if some of these individuals probably have limited financial resources, I mean, so whether you would ever actually be able to recoup any of that money is another big question that is by no means certain. So it's just really difficult. I mean, you've just got to feel for hundreds of these businesses all over the downtown core that are just really being hit, and I mean, it's really unfortunate.
Yeah. All right, David, thank you for the update this week. From your perspective, good that you talked to those lawyers. It's kind of a hard dose of reality, but it's great reporting nonetheless. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, David Sali from the Ottawa Business Journal. So again, coming up, Barry McLoughlin, our expert in crisis communications, is going to join us. I can't wait to hear his take on all the events that have happened over the last week and a half. Mr. Singh is still doing his news conference right now. Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the New Democrats, calling for a plan from Mr. Trudeau.
Reduce the pressures on our healthcare system, and I think some of that education or that awareness or providing information was missing. People didn't know, and I think that really helps if you say, hey, when people are vaccinated, they're less likely to get seriously ill, and they don't end up in the hospital. And then we don't get delays, so that someone who needs a knee replacement or a hip replacement can still go in and get that procedure. And we know that a lot of those procedures have been pushed off. A lot of treatments, even some cancer treatments, have been pushed off, and some diagnoses that could have happened got pushed off because of a lack of resources. So making it clear that the vaccination was one to keep you individually safe, but also to prevent an overflow of our healthcare system, and that's really vital. But now people are saying, well, what's the next step? We've gotten vaccinated. What's the next step look like? And I think we need to be looking at what those next steps are, and what does the future look like, and how are we going to deal with, is COVID going to be a part of our normal life? And then how are we going to deal with that on a daily basis? One of the things we know for certain is that our healthcare system should never be pushed to the brink. And that means making sure we've got stable, good funding so our healthcare system can deal with maybe COVID being a part of our life for a long time. And so that we're not worried about having a wave increase and then all of a sudden our healthcare can't deal with it.
So that's Mr. Singh. He's having a news conference. And again, don't forget, 1 o'clock, special meeting of the Ottawa City Council today. This is the Rob Snow Show on the City News.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, February 7th. Good morning. I'm Danielle Bain. Right now in Ottawa, it's -6, and in Smiths Falls, -2. Here's what's making news this hour. There are growing calls for federal action to try and end the convoy protest that's taking place in the capital and has spilled to other cities across the country. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is calling for an emergency debate in the House of Commons and wants to see a federal plan put forward immediately. He also believes a mediator is the best option to negotiate with the convoy organizers. A special council meeting called by Mayor Jim Watson is expected around 1 p.m. this afternoon so that councillors can discuss the ongoing protests. Ottawa police have started to search for where the protesters are getting their supplies from so that they can shut it down as quickly as possible. The number of people in hospital with COVID-19 in the province is down by 75 from yesterday to 2,155. 486 people are in the ICU. And of the just over 2,000 new COVID cases reported in Ontario today, 138 are in Ottawa, 36 are in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 21 are in Eastern Ontario, and 9 new cases are in Renfrew. And Canada's medal count at the Beijing Winter Olympics has climbed to 6, with 4 of them added today. Canada won gold and bronze in men's snowboard slopestyle. A bronze medal was captured in women's 500-meter speed skating, and another bronze was won by the mixed ski jumping team. City News Time, 11:32. I'm Danielle Bain, and for news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Well, I've been looking forward to this all morning. Barry McLoughlin is back, senior partner at TransformLeaders.ca. How are you keeping?
Very good, Rob. I never talked to you this late in the day. I mean, usually it's first thing in the morning.
I know. So you're well caffeinated now.
I'm well caffeinated, although it's David reminded me it's Groundhog Day, so this feels exactly like it did last Monday.
Right, yes, yeah.
Not a lot has changed.
No. So look, we know that the Ottawa Police Service, for example, has hired this firm called Navigator. Now, I've heard of Navigator before, but for people who aren't aware, just it describes itself, and this is right from its own material, Canada's leading high-stakes public strategy and communications firm. We apply proven campaign tactics to situations where success is critical, and this is their tagline. And you can't afford to lose. You can't afford to lose. Offices in Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton, Montreal, Ottawa. The Ottawa office is new, I believe. Regina, Vancouver, and London in the UK. We have advised 40 of Canada's 100 largest companies on mandates ranging from government relations, crisis response, issues management, public persuasion, activation campaigns, and capital markets and advisory services. So, I mean, it's a powerful firm.
Yeah.
What would it be doing for the police?
Well, I know them well, and we're in the crisis communications business. We do a tremendous amount of that with all kinds of organizations, and good luck to them for getting the contract. That's great. One thing I've tried never to do is to take a shot at a company that we also are in that zone.
I'm not asking you to do that.
I know, but the number one thing is you don't really know what's going on inside. I mean, they may be drafting a strategy, giving the key lines to the chief. The chief may discard half of them, keep some. That often is what you discover, So we can't totally park them with it. I think it's a way to give an objective set of eyes on an issue, to provide the strategic options, to provide a number of resources that can help them focus actually on the response rather than trying to spend a lot of resources internally trying to communicate them all, which is very tough to do in this kind of it's sort of become a international story.
Yeah.
So I think that's that point. They're a very solid firm, and they're involved in not just this, but government relations. I think it boils down to, though, who your client is. I mean, this is the chief, and the chief ultimately knows he's accountable for what's been going on. Even if you're brought in 24, 48, 72 hours after the event begins, it's already moving away from your control. You got to get in there, if not in advance, which they could have done, or immediately. That choice, I guess, I don't know when they actually came on board. But I do think that, this is an issue of where it seemed to be the police force, who are great, hardworking police officers, not their fault, but they seemed not to have the intelligence gathering that says, what is this? I mean, they weren't just driving through here in a protest and go on to somewhere else. They were coming here as their destination, the nation's capital.
Yeah.
And it was lined up, particularly right there in front of Parliamentary Precinct, to get as much noise as possible. They seemed to be unaware that they were going to be staying for more than a day or two, like a typical protest. And they thought that their strategy was to negotiate. It all sounds very good. But if the other party, JFK had a great line after meeting with Khrushchev. He said, the problem of dealing with the Russians is that they believe what's mine is mine and what's yours is negotiable. And that's really true. That I haven't seen a lot of that. Some progress is starting to be made, and one has to feel that it gradually fizzles out because we're not hearing an alternative strategy. And I think the lack of an alternative strategy is got to be owned by the chief.
See, this is what I think a lot of us are struggling with right now as we've seen the response over the last week and a half. As you say, Barry, we knew they were coming here. We knew that they vowed they weren't going to leave until they got what they want. So none of this was a secret, right? It was on the news every night for crying out loud.
We were tracking them.
We're trying, and now it's going through the city, and now and look at the crowd on this overpass, and right? Same story.
We wrote a book called Overcoming Panic and Fear, and 10 Principles of Crisis. Well, number one is to be proactive. They seem to just wait. It started to happen. React. I think that was really a problem. I think they should have set the rules. For those of you coming here are the rules. Follow these, we won't have a problem. If you don't follow these, we will begin the following process. Like, make it clear, what are the guidelines? I've been watching lots of video of this in downtown occasionally, and what I'm hearing is it's not that they're all maniacs, willing to tear down Canada. No, not really. Half of it's a party scene. They're playing road hockey.
Yeah, David walked around there for a couple of hours the other day and said it did have. Look, certainly there's a fringe element to it of whatever. Yeah. But it had a block party feel to it.
Right. See, school's out. There are no rules.
School's out, yeah.
Do what you want. Have fun. Hey, come on. And it's kind of the new version of Winterlude. I mean, really. And then the big block party, the Rideau and Sussex that went on for all hours, with the DJ and everything else. So I think that we didn't set the ground rules. We didn't make it clear, and we didn't seem to have the reinforcements necessary to implement what you can't say you're going to do something and then not do it. So it just seems they're playing catch up. There was no real strategy that you can spot here in crisis management terms. And, in the end, we got the RCMP involved. I know no mayor wants to do the Mel Lastman thing of calling in the military.
Calling in the army, yeah.
But, if you are overwhelmed, if they're not moving, and what do you do? What are your options? I'm hopeful. I think most people are hopeful not to have to go to that. I don't think anybody wants to see this armed kind of, thing where the military is facing down these protesters. That would be the wrong in almost every way.
You don't want another Oka. You don't want another
Oka. Yeah. That's right. So you've got to, make it clear they should begin an orderly process. And I think the fines and those kind of actions are extremely necessary. I have an office in Washington, a block and a half from the White House. And, around the White House, the same with London has this, if there's some protest coming, they just press a button and up comes these iron things from
bollards, yeah.
Bollards, exactly.
Yeah.
We don't have one. I think that's a lesson here. That should have gone up on Wellington Street at either end, and they couldn't have gone in front of the Parliament buildings. They couldn't have parked themselves there.
Yeah.
But that's a lesson learned for the future, by the way, and that's not even the Chief Soli's issue. But I think the other point here is, where is the leadership of the Prime Minister?
Yeah, I'm glad. Let's pivot to that right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, good question. Where is the Prime Minister? Okay.
Yeah,
now he tested positive for COVID. Fair enough. Okay. Yeah. But he said he wasn't sick. There's the isolation period is like 5 days.
Yeah.
So I think this is a question that's becoming more and more relevant the longer he remains out of sight. Am I right here or what?
Absolutely. The first few days, maybe it was understandable, but now Canadians want to see leadership. This is actually an issue in front of Parliament buildings for a reason. Their demands are actually not just ignoring the federal government. They of course, they're asking for things that no doubt cannot be given to them. But that's not the real point. People want a leader to stand up and on behalf of Canadians, address this point. Instead, his earliest comments were really his kind of moments of, basket of deplorables, kind of dismissing of them all and throwing them into the same kind of camp here. That was not a way to generate any kind of understanding. It was kind of a divisive point. I'm surprised that he went ahead and did that. And hasn't really improved very much since then. So, I really think that this is problematic, that he's got to step forward. I mean, his father knew that way back in 1968 when he faced down the Jean-Baptiste crowd throwing things at him, and he stood up on the balcony.
That's such a good point. I was reminded of that this morning. Pierre Elliott Trudeau, it's late June 1968, is Saint Jean-Baptiste. He's in Montreal. He's not yet the prime minister.
No.
It's just, I think it's 3 weeks.
Well, he won the nomination.
He was the Liberal leader. That's right. Yeah, but
he was the Liberal leader,
and then called an election, right?
Yeah.
And it's 68.
I'm sorry, I got to rephrase that. He actually he was the prime minister.
Yeah.
But he had not faced the election. Yeah.
Right. And he's warned by Drapeau, don't go.
Don't go.
To the Saint Jean-Baptiste parade in Montreal.
Yeah.
They hate you there. They think you're a sellout and a traitor to
That's right. You see, that's a really good point. Right? There's a lot of advice given to prime ministers, and I think one of them that often wins the day is don't even engage them. You're giving them credibility. Don't even talk. Don't even address them. Don't give them satisfaction.
Yeah.
This is what's been going on.
And they're throwing stuff. I mean, they are pelting this balcony that he is sitting on, right?
I remember it.
Yeah.
And you know what? It made him, it was part of the aura of Pierre Trudeau. It made him as a leader. Wow.
Yeah.
It defined him.
Not only is he smart, look how tough he is.
Yeah, that's right. So he had that kind of aura about him, and he understood the important role that a leader plays in a crisis. We are in a crisis now. When you have the mayor of Ottawa say that basically this is out of control, you see, even the chief of police is saying it's out of control. Well, you can, I'm glad they're thinking of mediation and everything else, but that's still more fine. They're trying to de-escalate, but 10 days of this hasn't happened. But I'm not seeing a real plan of action here that is not just the city of Ottawa. This has gone beyond it. This is a national, federal issue. Canada's, image and brand internationally is being tarnished by this, and we are not able to kind of get a hold of it.
Yeah, great points, Barry. Such great points. So seizing the day, and the timing is Pierre Poilievre. Okay, O'Toole is gone. O'Toole is gone. And let's play this. This is from his Twitter, right? I'm running for Prime Minister, says Pierre Poilievre.
COVID as a political opportunity. The Trudeau government has attacked small businesses, truckers, and other hardworking Canadians. They target law-abiding hunters and farmers while letting gangsters and gun smugglers run free. See, here's the problem. Trudeau thinks he's your boss. He's got it backwards. You are the boss. That's why I'm running for Prime Minister, to put you back in charge of your life. Together, we will make Canadians the freest people on earth, with freedom to build a business without red tape or heavy tax. Freedom to keep the fruits of your labor and share them with loved ones and neighbors. Freedom from the invisible thief of inflation.
Okay, all right. 3.7 million views, Barry, right now. 3.7 million views. What do you think of the... I mean, it's not unexpected that he's in it. It's like the most obvious thing ever. But how did he do launching it, do you think?
Well, he grasped the moment. I mean, he jumped. He looked ready for it. Thematically about freedom, he's chosen his theme. It wasn't a mishmash of complaints, but pulled under this thematic. Pierre, we already know, is a very articulate, strong communicator, and he knows how to hold the government's feet to the fire. This one, he was speaking to Canadians. Now, the real question is, was he just going after to cement the base or was he going to target new voters, new Canadians, those that were wavering, the middle-class voter that, they always say you don't form a government unless you get the middle-class Canadians who work hard, pay their taxes, and obey the law. That was the thematic. His real challenge will be he actually has to move from that segment into that middle segment. If he can't do it, it will be problematic. He's going after, don't forget, this is a multi-ballot thing. And these are all sort of, you get one crack at it, you do your ranked ballot, first, second, third ballots, right?
Yeah.
So he's got to go after a second and a third ballot. He wants to get the first ballot, securing that conservative base. Absolutely true. Got to keep an eye on the second and third one, so those Canadians that aren't anchored in the base need to be drawn in to put them over the top. So he has to make sure he's got a message for them.
Yeah, I have no doubt that he can win the leadership. I have no doubt about it. He can appeal to conservatives, just like O'Toole could appeal to conservatives. Andrew Scheer could appeal to conservatives. Can he win a general election? That's a totally different question.
That's right. It was intriguing that he didn't use the word conservative. He's running for prime minister, which is kind of somebody pointed out, on social media, we don't do it that way in Canada, but, he decided that he was going to, envision himself as prime minister. We would envision him as prime minister, and he never even used the word conservative. So it is intriguing that he took that. It was clearly a strategy.
Yeah. All right. Until next week. I quite like our late rendezvous here, Barry.
Yeah.
It's more like a brunch thing than anything else.
Yeah, we have to start changing that.
All right, okay.
Although I like that 9:30 though. I don't like to get that up.
All right, okay. Thanks.
Take care,
Barry.
Bye.
Yeah, Barry McLoughlin, TransformLeaders.ca. Great stuff. Money Mondays. Peter Fraser is standing by. Talk about your investment strategy and your financial plan. When we come back, Rob Snow Show, City News.
Today,
I'm blessed to be married to someone who is a scientist and spent a lot of time following what was happening over in China ahead of time. So he did give us the heads up that this was coming. Not that we believed him right off the bat, but when it did happen very, very quickly, we were prepared. We had hand sanitizer and we were set up to not close our doors. So we locked the kitchen down at Wellington Street, but we left this kitchen open. We put in protocols immediately. We only allowed our very small crew of 4 or 5 people in at the time. No deliveries were allowed to come in or out of the building without, they just weren't allowed in and out of the building. So we met them at the loading dock and had very strict protocols in place right away. We had masks and hand sanitizer and the whole thing. So we're very lucky from that perspective, and we're able to, learn as we went as far as doing small, individually packed caterings, the frozen soup program, food for the Ottawa mission. So we didn't have to close the kitchen and then learn how to reopen it. We just were able to modify and shift as we needed to. Because of our partnership with the Ottawa mission, we were able to very quickly help support them. They were able to send us some product and some supplies, so it wasn't a burden on our business, and we were able to supply the staffing and the packaging to help produce that when they needed it the most. And we produced about 1,400 meals a week to complement their meals, and we started our soup program right away. We realized very quickly that there was a need in the community to get together and all work together, not only to support local, but also just to support all the people that were suddenly in a position of, being locked down and not being able to get out. So by starting that soup program, our community, our clients got online and started making donations for the soups, and we were able to produce the soups and get them back out to people that needed it. We're right now currently making 150 liters of soup per week, but we've made, I would say, 5,000 or 6,000, easily since the pandemic. Probably more. I'd have to do the math, but lots. I think everybody in the city has to be very aware of how blessed we were to have great weather this summer and people were able to get out and about, and that's going to shift. So we do have to be much more aware of who our most vulnerable is, and I really think we have to work together as groups. There are so many organizations in the city that are doing something and contributing and working together, and I think it doesn't matter who, but see what you can do to just step up and help them, whatever it is, whether it's driving or delivering food, or someone has extra zucchini in their garden, or if they can afford to donate some money to any of these organizations. I just think we all have to work together. We're smarter and wiser than we were the first time.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Okay, let's take a look at the markets. Right now, we have the TSX down 0.5%. It's off about 91 points right now, 21,181. The U.S. markets are just slightly higher, but the gains are so small you may as well call them flat. The Canadian dollar is at 78.85 cents U.S. We have $91 oil. It's very strange. Oil's down about $1, $91 U.S. a barrel, okay? But the thing is that the Canadian dollar, despite this rally in the oil price, the Canadian dollar is almost unchanged, whereas usually the dollar and the oil price used to trade almost hand in hand. It hasn't happened so far this year. Gold is still range-bound, $18.18 U.S. an ounce, and Bitcoins today. Wow, big jump in Bitcoins today, David. You're a rich man again today. Up 8.2% today, up $3,000, David.
I will be using my gains to move out of Centertown.
$43,975 U.S. dollars gets you one Bitcoin as we welcome back Peter Fraser from Cardinal Planning and Manulife Securities. Good morning, Peter.
Hi, Rob.
It's great to hear from you. And we're going to talk about, again, all things money, financial planning related. What is our theme this morning? Black swans. Why are they called black swans? Because they are rare events, right, Peter? Yeah.
Well, yeah, there is that, and I think it's a term probably most people use, and I wanted to kind of couch a few of the beginning of the year's, reasons for the market doing what it's been doing. They can sort of line up with that black swan description. But I want to take a step back for a minute, tell listeners, they might already know, but the stock market has a sort of fear gauge, and it's called the VIX, which maybe people have heard of, but that's the CBOE Volatility Index. And when you're reading those market identifiers each time we start here, another interesting one just to watch is that the VIX is sort of reflects the market's expectation for volatility in the next 30 days. And you can think of the VIX kind of like as a risk, fear, stress thermometer for investors. And if you look at it year to date, the way we've been talking, that temperature is rising. For instance, the VIX was at 16 on the 3rd of January, and today it's at 23. So, in addition to some of those other things you're talking about, oil and Bitcoin, the VIX is rising. In and of itself, that's just an indicator. It doesn't necessarily mean everything. But at 5 weeks in with 3 down and 2 up, people are saying, are there black swans out there I need to worry about, or what else is going on? Because should I buy on these dips, or are they the first signs of more trouble? So we take a minute to kind of go back and look at some of the commonly held reasons that are backing up these recent market moves, if we could.
Okay. So what are some of the other sort of characteristics of black swan events then, Peter?
Well, we have to remember that it's considered that they couldn't have been foreseen. That's one of the qualities that people come back and say, well, that was something we couldn't see coming. So in the current, environment, arguably that's being said about something like a pandemic. And obviously the pandemic has an impact on lots of things that are going on. And when you combine other backdrops to that, other types of things that make markets uncertain, then it kind of torques that uncertainty to higher levels.
Yeah. Severe and extreme as well, right? Severe, extreme. Like think of a 9/11 type thing.
Severe and extreme. If you relate it to the pandemic, of course, that's requiring incredible amounts of all borrowed money at fiscal and monetary levels. Like the consequences of dealing with it are really, really significant in the here and now. So severe and extreme is another characteristic. And the other one, of course, is that armchair quarterbacking is fun, but it proves to be the case that people come to the conclusion after an event like that much of it could have been foreseen, and how come we didn't? So that's a third characteristic.
All right. So you're going to have a black swan event, and it's going to be severe and extreme and unpredictable. Okay. So how do we insulate ourselves from the worst effects of that? Well, have a plan.
Yeah.
Have a plan.
Good question. Yeah, good question. I mean, swings cause stress, and, in the extreme nature of what you introduced at the beginning of the conversation, the nausea we've seen, for example, just at the beginning of 2022 can kind of make the impulse to hit the sell button stronger. I always find it's important, kind of like reviewing your game film, or, putting your plays into your noodle here, but there are some bromides, I think, for times like this, and I don't say that facetiously. I think it's really important to remember that volatility can also offer opportunities, and declines so far this year are not outside the realm of historical ranges. So if you have a portfolio and you like what's in it, particularly on the stock side, and you trust your judgment and that of perhaps the team you're working with, then if they go on sale, you can kind of consider adding to them if you've got some conviction around that, because prices came down on average in this type of environment. I think it's important.
Or in the case of Facebook, way down. So
yeah, way down. Right. Yeah, well, I mean that when interest rates, for instance, there's fear in the market. The market doesn't like fear. The market doesn't like worry. They get squirrely around the unknown. But where interest rates are going has an especially hard effect on growth flyers, which are largely represented in the NASDAQ, and we've seen that.
Yeah.
Keeping cool, keeping a level head, look at the long run, and they tend to blind us or diminish our recollection that we also have good days. And, you didn't build your plan on only being bearish, is what I say to people. We factor it in, but it's not the foundation of our plan preparation. Patience also, sounds a little bit light, but I find it's really important to remember that you're on a journey to a long-term destination that is going to span decades. So, if you're investing in your 30s, this could have 40, 50 more years of life to it. It will be a modified, destination as you go along, but, you have time, and the landscape of a good plan is absolutely going to go through things from a black swan through Januaries, and frankly, they're unavoidable. But it's a good idea,
This program is brought to you by